state for the record why we are participating electronically, the school board as well as the finance committee. So I'll start. So participating electronically at home, my attendance is not practical due to COVID-19, and I can hear the proceedings and I am alone in the room. So Erin, why don't we go to you?
I am participating remotely from my home because of COVID. I am alone and I can hear everything fine.
Thank you. Karen?
I am participating at home because of COVID. I am alone in the room and I can see and hear everything.
Thank you. Becky?
I am participating at home because of COVID. I'm alone in the room and I can see and hear the proceedings.
Thanks. Allison?
I am participating remotely because of COVID. I am alone in the room and I can see and hear everything.
Okay, we're going to move over to the finance committee. Brian?
The finance committee will wait until we have just before we start the public hearing for us to adjourn. At the moment, I'm the only finance committee member here anyway.
Okay, thanks.
All
right. Yep, understood. Thank you. All right, so we're going to move over to our agenda adjustments, correspondence, and approval of minutes. So any agenda adjustments that we want to offer? I think there was one.
Yeah, I have a couple. During discussion, I'd like to have a conversation with the board about the deliberative session and how we want to approach that. So we would add that during the right after Gina's data presentation, if that's okay. And then Kelly Seeley had informed the board that we have an individual interested in the school district clerk position. So I'd like to add a deliberative action to give the board the opportunity to approve that person. As you know, that role is presently unfilled. We would like it filled for annual meeting, and we have somebody that's come forward and volunteered to do that. So that's the two pieces that I have for agenda adjustments.
Good. Thanks, Andy. All right. So we'll add those in the deliberative session. Let's move over to, I guess we have to do so I need a motion for the agenda to be adjusted as requested.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we have to do roll call all night. So Becky, we'll start with you. Becky, can you give me a thumbs up if you didn't come off mute? There we go. All right. So Becky said yes. Karen?
Karen, aye.
Allison?
Allison, aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
And Ken, aye. It's 5-0. Thanks. All right. So we'll move over to correspondence, resignations, and nominations.
Yeah, I just have a couple brief things. First, I wanted to let the board know that the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee has been meeting regularly, and it's our intent to bring something forth for a discussion at your next regularly scheduled meeting. I do want to publicly thank the committee members for all their work and the community who has participated at the last two meetings during public input. It has been very productive, and I want to thank them. Second, I also wanted to make you aware that our Hollis meeting, we reflected on the SAU renovation project, and we're putting that on hold at this time for a variety of reasons. Some simple ones are to gain more information regarding the property and other properties that may be available, as well as we just didn't think during the pandemic and everything that's going on with the financial constraints that many people are feeling, it was the right time to move forward with that. So we won't be discussing that tonight, but you will most likely see it come back at our SAU meeting, probably either February or May.
Okay, thank you. Just bear with me for a moment. I just want to check something. Andy, were we, did we want, and Gina, did we want to talk about the Mr. Putnam correspondence as well here?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, it's, as the board knows, we received a correspondence regarding one of our teachers and a conversation that occurred with regard to the recent situation that occurred in Washington, D.C. As an administration, when we were notified of that situation, we began to investigate that. And I think at this time, I would ask the board to allow the administration to finish their investigation, as this does have a process that we have agreed to follow regarding the collective bargaining agreement. And after Gina, myself, and Ms. Boulay finish our investigation, we'd be happy to report that to the board at our next meeting.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. So with that, we're going to move over to approval of minutes. So start with December 16th meeting minutes. On page 3, I'm sorry, the following amendments were offered. Page 3, line 22, insert commented following Superintendent Corey. On page 3, line 26, replace dust with dusting. Page 3, line 37, insert thanked following Chairman Haig. Page 4, line 20, or line 2 rather, insert of increase following trend. And last, page 5, line 23, insert of following part. So we'll need a motion for that, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thanks. So Becky? We have to do roll call every time. Thank you.
Becky, aye.
Karen?
Karen, I.
Allison?
Allison,
Aaron?
Aaron, I.
And Ken, aye. So that carries 5-0. Thanks. Okay. I believe we are ready for our public input now. So we'll open the floor for any public input. I'll just wait a moment in case there's anyone that's on mute trying to come off mute before we move on.
This is Eric Power. Can you hear me? I have some public input.
Yes, Eric. Hi, we can hear you. Good evening.
Good evening. I was looking at the school board packet, and I don't know if this is going to be covered tonight or not, but I had some questions on the the test scores. I noticed on page 70 of the packet, it starts talking about an overall score range 1 to 4, but I don't see that being used in the rest of the bars. I see 1 to 3. And it's also not clear to me what a 2 means for met or nearly met standard versus a 3 achieved standard. That's a big difference to me. So I'm trying to understand what these NHSAS scores mean. I have some concerns about them because it looks like we're having some challenges, but I just wanted to understand if you're going to be talking about that later today and explaining how those scores work and clarifying those types of things. Thank you.
I'm just getting to the page myself. Did you say page 70, Eric?
You did. Page 70 in the PDF, yes.
Thanks. Okay.
Is this what Gina's discussion is going to be about?
I believe so. That's what I just.
Yes, I'm speaking to that slide and explaining the 1, 2, 3 versus 1, 2, 3, 4.
Thank you. Yeah, this is part of the student performance data. Yep. Okay. So Eric, more to come on that. Okay. Is there any other public input? As you're all aware too, we will as we just talked, Gina will be given a Assistant Superintendent Gina Bergscott will give that, and we also have our public hearing as well this evening. So those will be options as well for the public tonight. Okay, if not, we're going to recess and move to the public hearing then.
You have the principal
sorry,
report,
thank you, Andy. Apologize, I jumped a little too far there. So let's move over to Principal Bully around on that. So good evening.
Good evening, everyone. On our administrator's report, we just want to remind all the families that Monday, January 18th is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and that will be a holiday. We are all looking forward to Tuesday, January 19th, when all the students for in-person learning will return to our buildings. I know administrators and some of the teachers that are working in the building definitely miss all the students and the lively chatter when they're here. So we're looking forward to that. I think so far our remote learning for the entire district has gone very well. I know teachers have been in touch with parents for any areas where there may be some difficulty as far as ensuring that students are constantly connected with their teachers, but we've reached out to them and adjusted those situations. Overall, I think the internet connections have been working fairly well, especially compared to how it was back in September. So we're very pleased with that progress. In general, we've had a couple of activities that have taken place at CSDA. We recently had our spelling bee, and I want to announce that we have 2 students, Alex and Noah, who are our winners and runner-up. So their information will be sent to the state, and hopefully Alex is, as long as Alex can attend, we're hoping for a good win, hopefully, for the state. So we'll keep you in tune about that information. Obviously, it was a very difficult and challenging spelling bee this year because it had to be done remotely. But I have to say that everyone did very well, and I want to congratulate our new librarian, Alana Taylor, who did a really great job. I know it was a challenge to put this whole program together, but I'm glad that we were trying to do something that is more of the norm for our education. We also had PTO, as always, has been supporting the teachers, staff, and students. And Friday, they provided a PTO magic show with Magic Fred. And there were over 100 participants that took part in a virtual magic show. And I attended the PTO meeting last night with Mr. Molinari. And I guess the students really had a great time at it. And coming up through February, I think 22nd, February 12th, RMMS will be doing the jump rope for heart. It is actually now called the Kids Heart Challenge, since everything's going to be virtual. Again, another program that has to go virtual. But basically, they're going to be looking for fundraising to provide heart-healthy support. And on February 11th, Mrs. Boulay, myself, has volunteered. I came up with the idea to try to create some type of community between both RMMS and CSDA students and families. So on February 11th at 7 p.m., I will be doing a read aloud for RMMS, and at 8 o'clock, I'll be doing a read aloud for CSDA. So I'm looking forward to seeing students and families participate in that. As far as our enrollment has been steady. CSDA did receive, actually, we had 3 families move in. I just realized that it says 1 new move in here, but we had 1 family that had left, and 3 families did move in. So we actually had an increase of 2 students. So I'll have that changed as far as what's in parentheses there. It should say 2. And I know that we do have a few families that have been calling at CSDA that our enrollment seems to be increasing each month. Other than that, everything's going well.
Okay, thanks, Principal Boulay. Let me just get over. I apologize. I was jumping around on our agenda tonight. So we do have some discussion around the FY22 budget before we get to the public hearing, just for everyone's awareness. So we're going to move to that now on the FY22 budget with our overview here.
I wanted to provide the board an update before we get into the budget presentation regarding a couple things. Allison, do you have a question?
I did have a question about how the symptom monitoring has been going and what the rates are.
Bob or Gina, you want me to take it or?
Sure. No, I can talk a little bit about that. So we have continued symptom monitoring in remote learning just to track. We have not had, we've had one additional case in the Brookline schools since we left for the holiday break, which we consider to be good news. We do have an increased number of students that are quarantining. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. I can get those to the board. I think that the trends that we have seen over the break is that we have a family member, whether it's a parent who's testing positive, which is resulting in entire families needing to quarantine. So we'll continue to monitor that. But as of today, in terms of the number of positive cases, we just have the one.
Are you finding that, I think I didn't present my question well. Are you finding that our families are actually doing the symptom monitoring, continuing to do it?
Yes, they are. And we're following the same process that we were when we were in session. So, families are asked to complete the daily symptom monitoring. Sometimes families get forgetful and they don't do that, and they get the gentle reminder, the call from the office. And we've continued to make those calls. Obviously, the first day back from break, the first day of remote, we made a lot of calls, but I think people have fallen back into the routine. So to really answer your question, Allison, we are able to follow up with every family if they do not complete the daily symptom monitoring.
Can I just a quick question too, now that since we're on that topic, with having roughly a month out of school, it's something I've been wondering, should we consider a question about travel now that people are coming back? Because I do worry a little bit about the state guidance and everything says that people shouldn't be entering the schools, and I know we've sent it into the bulletins, but there's no real mechanism to track that. And that, there's a potential this week particularly where that could still be a concern.
Yeah, Gina, do you want to address that?
Well, I just wanted to say that we have encouraged our families to contact the school administration, and they have been very honest about their return dates, and we've offered guidance, and some, to your point, will need to quarantine beyond our return date, and we're working with every family individually. We feel that we tried to look at those questions and see if it made sense to reword them and include travel even from the very beginning of the school year, and it didn't seem to fit in well with the daily symptom monitoring because we're looking at simply symptoms. And so we are relying on families to be truthful about their travel, and to the best of our understanding, they have been.
Okay, are there any other questions? I know, Andy, you had something else you wanted to discuss as well.
I just wanted to let the board know that it is our intent to open next Tuesday. I want to thank our transportation services because we've been delivering meals during this time of remote learning. Our cafeteria staff has been in working. Our custodians have been disinfecting and doing everything that they can to get us ready. And our teachers have been delivering a very solid remote learning experience. So I want to thank everybody and just hope that people understand that the magnitude of work that has gone into making these 2 weeks possible. And then to reiterate Gina's point, I do want to thank families because they have been coming forward and being totally honest with us. Now that they know all we're going to basically do is say, okay, you need to quarantine till say the Tuesday after or the Wednesday after, whatever the 10-day date is. And I think that's why we're seeing our numbers holding steady. We did see a recent, kind of what I'll say bubble appear in Hollis, but that is more a result of the backlog of testing than something happening like right now. Because a lot of the numbers coming out now are from multiple days and kind of being combined together. But the positivity rate today, I believe, if I recall correctly, was around 5.9%. which is trending in the right direction, and we hope that continues. And we honestly believe that once we get back to our routine as a school district, we help families get back to their routine as families, and we start to create those two communities that act as bubbles because we're controlling a lot of that. We have, just for people listening, started our fall winter sports Things have gone exceptionally well. We've had no cases to date. And I want to thank Brian Bumpus and Mike Thompson, who have been overseeing those protocols so our students can be active. And as we saw tragically, our neighboring districts have faced 2 recent tragedies, one of a student and one of an adult. And that just reiterates the need for that social contact. And it's one of the big reasons I'm hoping to get the kids and planning to get the kids back in school next week.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move over to the FY22 discussion now.
Right, and this is just some information prior to the public hearing. First tonight is our public hearing. We're doing that virtually because it gives us the flexibility if the board chooses to go with a virtual deliberative session and a virtual annual meeting and then a vote. So the next domino in that series would be if you decide tonight you want to go to a virtual deliberative session, we would send a notice out to all taxpayers in Brookline that we need to get into the mail by January 22nd. Tad Putney over on the town side has been wonderful, and we're coordinating labels with for voters. And if we move forward, we believe we'll be able to ready to take care of that and move that forward. If we go that route, our first virtual meeting or the information session would be February 1st. And what that would be is a virtual Zoom where the board would go over the warrant articles and receive information from community members regarding their thoughts and feedback. The board, because it's virtual and we don't have the knowledge to know if a person is a registered voter or not, doesn't have the ability to increase or decrease numbers, but they could decide what warrant articles they wanted to put forth or what warrant articles they wanted to remove. The next piece would be on February 8th. We would have a virtual annual meeting. That is where the board would come forward and say, these are the articles we've chosen to put forth, give a presentation on those articles and let everybody know in the community the procedures. The March 1st, we would post and make our warrant articles available to voters, as we always do, so they'd be posted, and these are the warrants that we'd be voting on. And then we would have our traditional voting day, March 9th at CSDA. It would be my intent if we go, whether we go with a traditional meeting or a virtual meeting, that on voting day, March 9th, our schools in Brookline would be remote. Simply, I don't want people in and out of the building with the kids there, so we'd try to limit that and have that on Tuesday the 9th. The board could decide, based on information they hear tonight, to run a traditional deliberative session, which would be an in-person meeting, which that schedule's already been published. And what the difference is, that schedule in an in-person meeting allows the community to decide if they wanted to change any of the articles up or down, whether it be a warrant article on the contingency, special ed trust, or the overall budget. And I share that because as we were going through what I call the final phase of the budget process, it's when we begin to review and reflect upon the tax impact of the tax rate. And as the board recalls, a few years ago, we put in a tax cap, and that tax cap would have been impacted in a negative way with the budget we discussed last month. And the reason for that is because state aid, in terms of the supplemental aid, is in flux, and we cannot guarantee that it's coming. And if it doesn't arrive, we would have a budget that does not meet the tax cap that was approved by the voters. To that, we've made an adjustment to the budget that I will talk about tonight, and then the board can have the information to decide whether they would like to move forward with the budget that I present tonight, or whether they would like to go to a traditional meeting and see what the voters would like to do. I did, Gina was kind enough to seek clarification from our attorney. It is our responsibility to put forth a budget that meets the tax cap, it's not your responsibility to vote to recommend that budget. So yes, we have to put a tax cap number budget forward, which we'll discuss, but you as a board can still decide whether you want to support that or not support that. So that was the piece I wanted to give you before we went into the public hearing, so you'd have some ideas about what a virtual meeting means, what an in-person meeting means, and how the tax cap has come into play.
Okay. Any questions, anyone, before we come off that topic? No. Okay. All right. So with that, that means it's time to move to our public hearing. So we're going to need to recess. So I will need a motion to recess until the conclusion of the public hearing on the proposed FY22 budget, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we're going to do a roll call here. Becky?
Becky, aye.
Thank you. Karen?
Karen, I.
Allison?
Allison, I.
Aaron?
Aaron, I.
Ken, I. So that's 5-0. It is 6:27, so we are in recess. Before we begin, I just quickly want to go back to the Finance Committee to just state why they're attending electronically so we can resume our discussion. So, Brian, if we could start with you.
Yes, so Finance Committee, myself, Brian, I am meeting remotely from home due to social distancing. There's no one else in the room, other people in the house. And Dennis?
Dennis Como, attending remotely for social distancing protocols. And there's no one else in the room, but there are others in the house.
And is Matt here yet? Yes.
I just let him in.
Ah, Matt is joining us just now. Give us a second. He's connecting. Apparently having difficulty connecting to audio, but let's give him a second more. Hi, Matt, you there?
I am, yes.
Okay, we're just starting the meeting, so if you could just say where you are and why you're meeting virtually.
Matthew Malo, meeting remotely due to social distancing due to COVID-19. I am calling in tonight from Concord, New Hampshire, and there is one other person in the room for now.
Okay, and so we're ready to start the public meeting. So back to you, Ken. Thanks.
Very good, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna, for those in the packet, page 3, we're gonna go through the public hearing now.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. Tonight we're at Captain Samuel Douglas Academy. We're going to be discussing the Brookline School District public hearing. I'd like to thank Chair Ken Haig, Vice Chair Erin Saris, Secretary Karen Csau, Member Rebecca Howie, and Member Allison Marzano. This is a budget that goes on for many months, and we appreciate their input and their support as we've gone through this process. Myself, Andy Corey, Assistant Superintendent Gina Bergskog, Assistant Superintendent Robert Thompson, and Business Administrator Kelly Seeley have also been working diligently on this budget, and we look forward to presenting the numbers. First, just a little bit of the history around our Brookline School District enrollment. As you can see, we have our actual numbers in dark green and the 5-year projection. These projections are done by the New England Development Association, an organization that we have been using for many, many years. They're an independent organization that comes in and reviews the birth rate, the number of permits pulled in the town, all of those things that could go to impacting enrollment. So we're presently at 572 and have been right in now that area for the last 3 years. The projections see us increasing to a little bit over 600 and then significant growth in 2025 and 2026. Obviously, growth with regards to the community of Brookline has always been gone hand in hand with the economy. So as much as we have projections for 4 and 5 years out, it will always be a result of where is the economy, because many of the people in our communities work locally and transition in and out based on work environments and jobs. But we do see a positive trend with enrollment heading into the near future. The Brookline School District cost per pupil versus the New Hampshire average cost per pupil. As you can see, the New Hampshire elementary average is the green line and the Brookline cost per pupil is the blue. Presently in FY20, the average cost to educate an elementary student in New Hampshire is $17,189. Brookline is doing that for $15,040. I think one of the reasons we've had success is because of our process with the budget. We start basically in July, reviewing enrollment data and working with our principals, and eventually arriving at what we believe is something that will move our districts forward. 1 minute for tech.
Sorry, when someone comes in, then I have to unshare my screen.
No problem. And we're at the budget process. Perfect. So a little bit about the process. Principals do a needs assessment from July, August, and September, where they meet with special ed director, Kelly Seeley, our budget administrator, the assistant BA, and start to talk about what they believe are their needs for this coming school year. Then we enter the superintendent's revision stage from October to November, where each of the principals presents their budgets to me, and we talk about, where we're going, what we need, and we look at that from 2 objectives. Obviously, moving the Brookline School District forward, but also how does this budget fit into the overall budgets within the SAU, most particularly the co-op, because again, it's the same taxpayer paying both of those school costs. Then it goes to the school board and the finance committee for revisions in December. We had some very thoughtful discussions. Then we look at the tax effort determination using the final budget and revenue estimates, which are January, which we are now, and we're going to have some modifications tonight. We compare the tax effort percentage to the tax cap percentage and adjust as needed. And then we, here tonight, have the public hearing in January. Next is the tax cap calculation. We look at the far left, we have the tax rate components, which are your operating budget and your warrant articles, which give you a total warrant. Then we have local revenue, state aid grant, retained state tax, and the FY21 state grant, which gives us our total tax effort. So in 2021, all right, we had a budget of $10,025,776. Our warrant articles were $501,236 for a total warrant of $10,527,012. And you can see there they provide the local revenue pieces. The next column is tax year 21 for the Brookline School District FY22 tax cap piece. There we see an operating budget of $9,867,097. We see warrant articles of 501,236 for a total warrant of $10,368,333. We see the same local revenue, state aid grant, and retained state aid. What we don't see is the state grant, which is the piece that I believe the legislature is still working on, but as a result of where we're at yet, and with COVID and the variety of issues that are facing them for meetings, we don't have much clarity on the issue. So you see that we had a percentage difference of 10.5% under the middle column, and that was reduced to 8% under the far right column, because the 8% complies with the tax cap. Next, I'll provide you an overview of the warrant. First is the articles for the election. We're looking for a clerk, a treasurer, and a moderator for 1 year. And we have one school board member's position up, which is a 3-year position. The filing dates from the 20th of January through the 29th. Again, if you're interested in running for any of those positions, you could contact Town Hall, or you can contact the SAU offices, and we will gladly assist you with next steps for filing dates. We have the financial articles, we have the original budget and the tax cap budget. Article 2 is the operating budget, which we last month had discussed at $10,025,776. Tonight we're looking at $9,867,097. We're looking at Article 3, which is a maintenance trust of $75,000. That article is funded from the unreserved fund balance. Article 4 is the special ed trust, which is $25,000, which is also funded from the unreserved fund balance. Article 5 is the contingency, which is funded at $40,000, also from the unreserved fund balance. And Article 6 is the SAU budget of $361,236, which is the Brookline apportionment of the total SAU budget. So for fiscal 22 proposed, we have $10,527,012 that we discussed last month. Tonight we're discussing $10,368,333. Last month we were at a 4.1% increase, which was $415,792. Tonight we're at $257,113, or a 2.5% increase. A little comparison between FY21 and FY22. First, Article 2, operating budget. It was $9,651,760. In FY22, the original was $10,025,776. The tax cap budget is $9,867,097. The maintenance trust is $75,000 across the board. The special ed trust is $25,000 across the board. The contingency is $40,000 across the board. The SAU budget in FY21 was $319,460. The original FY22 was $361,236, and the FY22 tax cap is $361,236. The majority of the increase at the SAU is, the voters may recall, we approved a facilities director's position to oversee all our maintenance across the district, and we had an increase in our business office assistants in order to bring them to what I would call equitable funding versus other districts in the surrounding area. So we had a total fiscal year 2022 proposed, an FY21 of $10,111,220. The original budget that we discussed last month was $10,527,012. The FY22 tax cap is $10,368,333. In terms of the budget cuts from last month's presentation to this month's presentation at the public hearing, to get to the tax cap, we needed an amount to get to 8% tax effort. To get to the 8% tax effort, we needed to cut $158,679. We spent a number of meetings discussing this. We looked at going all the way back to July where we had started. And we have selected the following cuts, and I'll try to explain these at this time. At RMMS, we have a tech integrator's position. In the total package, salary, benefits, New Hampshire retirement, everything results in $114,189. If you would talk to me about this position a few years back, I would have a different feeling than I do now. During the budget discussions, this came up, and we were intending to leave it in for one more year and then look at migrating it to a new position. But what we've observed since March 13th of 2020 to now is a large increase in our proficiency with staff regarding technology. This move to Zoom and remote learning has forced everyone to pick up new skills and integrate so much more into their classes. So although we don't like to lose the position, when we're looking at making cuts, we're trying to figure out what would have the least impact on our students. This allows us to maintain all our class sizes, which is critical. It allows us to keep all our services for special education. It allows us to keep all our services for our accelerated programs in the area of math. The second piece that we had looked at is we had talked about MTSS paras. MTSS stands for multiple tiers of system support. And as you'll see from the data presentation later tonight, we did have a little concern that our students haven't performed as well in remote learning as they did in face-to-face. It is not just a Brookline issue, this is a national issue. And I think if we compared our students to the state, which we're unable to do this year because of the way state testing was, or to national, I have a feeling we would still be out ahead, but it is not the typical results that we see for our students. So we were originally adding 2 paras that would serve in both, one in each building, to support students who maybe we were struggling in the area of math or falling behind in reading. One of the reasons why I was willing to make this difficult cut is because we did have a para for this support position in the FY21 budget. But when we went into COVID and everything we've gone through this year, we used those funds to add another classroom teacher because we had to do some remote learning classes, some in-person classes. So it was the best way to use the money for 1 year. So we will still have one MTSS para next year once we move out of this remote situation. And then we just moved projectors to our REAP grant for $850. The REAP grant is the Rural Education Grant, and we felt that was the appropriate place to go. We also don't know if we will receive more revenue because we don't know what the state is planning to do. There is the possibility, based on retirements and teacher turnover and things of that nature, that some of our existing positions will come in slightly lower than budgeted for. And what we would do is look at those potential dollars to offset these cuts. It's not something we're thrilled to do, but at the same time, we're supporting the voters' intention of the 8% tax cap, and we're trying to do it in a way that minimizes the impact to our schools. So here we have a slide about FY22 local revenue. And as you can see, your FY22 original and tax cap, we see a slight difference from FY21 to FY22 in food service. We see a slight difference, 12%, in special ed aid, going from $56,910 to $50,000. We see our grants going down by $5,000 for a 3% reduction. We had the voted fund balance of $140,000, so there's no change there. And the fund balance to reduce taxes. Last year, because of the pandemic and the changes we had made, we were able to utilize $409,731 to offset the tax rate. We're projecting $200,000 this year. We don't envision between PPE costs and the other costs that have come up related to the pandemic, that will be able to return the same amount in taxes. So that was reduced 51%. And then the other balance of $33,000 has remained the same. So we're basically seeing a 21% reduction from FY21 to either the original budget or the tax cap budget. The state aid, just as a reminder, kindergarten aid appears now in adequacy. So we original in FY22 have $2,134,564. That does not change with the tax cap. The retained tax was $577,572 in FY21. That has a slight growth to it to $625,035 in both the original and the tax cap, for a difference of 8%. Again, the one-time FY21 grant is $591,264. So that overall, we see that 14% reduction. Here is the tax rate info. We highlight FY20 to FY21, and we see the operating budget in 20 being $9,651,760. Our original FY22 was $10,025,776, and the tax cap takes us to $9,867,097. We then have the total from our warrant articles. The tax cap and the original are no different. We see the local revenue there, which we do see the reduction from FY20. We have the state aid grant, which we just talked about. We have the retained state tax, which is going up slightly. Again, the FY21 state grant, $591,264, is going away. Many of you might have heard that referred to by the state as the stabilization grant. Please understand that that stabilization grant is going away across the board, so there'll also be a impact with our other district in the co-op. So your total tax effort is going up. The original budget would have made a tax effort of $6,971,413. The tax cap has reduced that tax effort to $6,812,732, which gives us your Brookline School District tax rate, which are outlined right there. Goes from 16.4 to 13.8 between the original and the tax cap. The Brookline state tax rate stays at 0.93. So your total tax rate will come out to be, the original proposed was 1117. That goes down to 1094. It's still an increase because of that loss of the stabilization grant. what I'd like to do now is just walk everybody through each of the operating articles. And then at that point, I would turn it back over to the board. Article 2, operating budget, says to see if the Brookline School District will vote to raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amounts set forth in the budget posted with the warrant, or as amended by vote of the first session for the purposes set forth herein, totaling $9,867,097. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $9,857,075, which is the same as last year, with certain adjustments required by previous action of the school district or by law of the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, 10 and 16 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. That would be an estimated net tax impact of $10.41 per thousand. The key budget changes in Article 2, we go from FY21, $9,651,760. That reflects operating budget plus the teacher's contract warrant article and the full day kindergarten article approved in March 2020. FY22 budget is the $9,867,097 for a dollar change of $215,337, which is a percent change of 2.2. In FY22, the new items request, we're looking at $10,386 for academics. We're reducing personnel by $45,694. We have computer equipment and services for $13,175 increase. And for facilities and safety, we have $11,765. So under the new items request, we actually have a reduction of $10,368. The major changes for Article 2, teachers' salaries will be down by $115,296. Health insurance is down by $64,432. Special ed speech services are down by $26,445. Special ed contracted services, these are programs we are obligated to offer under a student's individual education plan. Those programs also require us to provide the transportation and the materials. That is an increase of $303,221. Your benefits, the New Hampshire retirement system, FICA, etc., are going up by $91,603. We have a need for a new special ed position based on enrollment and services that we need to provide, $59,495. And then we have what we would call discretionary items that we're reducing by $32,809. Those fall into academic areas, capital improvements, and maintenance. So your net budget change is an increase of $215,337, or 2.2%. Next, as I alluded to, we also have what is known as a default budget. Should the voters not choose to support the operating budget as proposed, they can vote for the default budget. The FY21 adopted operating budget was $9,651,760. Any obligations that we're contracted to do or are required by law get added to the default budget. An example of that would be our special education costs. So that will increase by $355,816. One-time FY21 expenses would be reduced by $150,500. Those could have been computer purchases. Those are non-recurring required items. So your FY22 default budget comes in at $9,857,075. Here are the details for your default budget. Wages and benefits increased by $48,911. Special ed services and transportation increased by $275,234. Your health, your dental, your FICA, and your New Hampshire retirement decreased by $1,957. Your retirement benefit per the CBA increases $67,805. Your regular ed transportation decreases $22,077. Your transfers decreased by $10,000, and there are other various small amounts in a number of accounts that decrease by a total of all those accounts of $2,100. That takes us to Article 3, the Maintenance Trust. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate a sum of up to $75,000 from the June 30th unassigned fund balance surplus available for transfer on July 1, 2021 to be added to the previously established school facilities maintenance fund. The net estimated tax impact, there's no rate increase in FY22. The unassigned fund balance is the sum of the unspent taxes and revenues. Expending $75,000 that could potentially be returned as revenue equates to foregoing a potential rate reduction of 72 cents per thousand. The maintenance trust, we have a present balance in FY21, projecting an ending balance of $50,000. We would be replenishing the fund at $75,000 as the warrant article indicates. In FY22, in the new item sheets and our capital improvement plans, we are proposing use of $52,901. So we anticipate an ending balance at the end of FY22 of $72,099. The proposed uses for the maintenance trust, we are doing upgrades to RMMS classroom flooring for $22,723. We are doing repair work on the exterior door ramps for $8,000. And we have a HVAC controller replacement for $22,178 for a total of $52,901 that we would utilize out of the maintenance trust. Article 4 is the Special Education Reserve Trust. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate a sum of up to $25,000 from the June 30th unassigned fund balance available for transfer on July 1, 2021 to be added to the previously established Special Education Expendable Trust Fund. No amount to be raised from taxation. Again, this does not increase the tax rate, but by foregoing returning the $25,000 of revenue, we see this resulting in a 2 cents per thousand that could have reduced the tax rate. The special ed trust status. There is a current balance of $200,000. Right now, we're projecting an anticipated use of no dollars. We anticipate a balance of $200,000, and we're looking at $25,000 to be added to that fund, and we see a balance of $225,000. We are still about a half a year to go. We aren't projecting uses now, but I can tell you from my discussions with our student services personnel, we do have concerns about some potential unanticipated uses. So this fund may be accessed this year as we inform the board way back in July, but right now the budget goes well. Article 5 is the contingency. To see if the school district will vote to establish a contingency fund for the current year for unanticipated expenses that may arise, and further to raise and appropriate a sum of up to $40,000 to go into the fund. This sum to come from the unassigned fund balance surplus available for transfer on July 1, 2021. Again, there is no rate increase in FY22, but not returning the $40,000 to the taxpayer means that they forego a potential rate reduction of 39 cents per $1,000. Just so before I move on the contingency, I just want to let folks know the contingency became a very valuable resource during this pandemic. When we were looking at increasing extra classes for students and things like that, we were able to utilize the contingency or know it was there in case the budget needed it. So it is a fallback type of account. It cannot be spent without the school board's permission, and that remains intact. Article 6 is the SAU budget, the school administrative unit budget. Shall the voters of the Brookline School District adopt a school administrative unit budget of $1,953,257 for the forthcoming fiscal year, in which $361,236 is assigned to the school district budget of this school district. This year's adjusted budget of $1,918,864 with $354,875 assigned to the school budget of this school district will be adopted if the article does not receive a majority vote of all the school district voters voting in the school administrative unit. The estimated net tax impact is $3.48 per $1,000. Article 6, the SAU budget, we see a percentage change of $170,000, 156, which equates to about a 9.5% change. The biggest drivers of our budget, we are primarily almost all salaries and benefits as a result of the nature of the SAU. So we see salaries going up by $67,839. We have each of our assistant superintendents has been provided a 3% increase in this budget. That 3% increase is basically to kind of give them a salary adjustment so they will be on par with their local peers. All other staff has an increase of 2%. There is $16,000, which was board approved salary adjustment. That majority of that is a result of the facilities position. When we hired that position, we had already started the school year, so there was a salary savings that we now see being adjusted to be a 12-month position as was designed. One of the big drivers in all our budgets this year is the New Hampshire retirement increase. The SAU will see that go up $56,318. For those of you who have been around a long time, the state used to split New Hampshire retirement cost 75-25, with a district paying 75% of the cost and the state paying 25%. The state, a number of years back, decided that they would no longer pay the 25%, and that cost was totally downshifted to local districts. And we continue to see every 2 years this type of increase. The teacher's rate is going from 17.8% to 21.02%, and the employee rate is going from 17.17% to 14.06%. It's interesting at the SAU, the vast majority of employee fall under the employee rate, and just a few of the positions by New Hampshire designation fall under the teacher's rate. The health benefits, we have a guaranteed maximum rate increase of 10.9%. That was across the SAU. So at the SAU, that results in an $18,826 increase. Benefits and the associated taxes that go along with the higher salaries are $8,349. And that takes us through the presentation of our warrant articles, and I would be happy to turn it back over to the board chair.
Thank you, Superintendent Corey. Appreciate the detailed overview there. What we're going to do now is allow for time on each warrant for the public to provide input. I will ask for testimony in favor as well as testimony in opposition 2 times, and we'll go through each warrant. That will allow the public to provide input. Once that input has been received through all the warrants, we'll close our public hearing. You're welcome to stay on and watch the rest of the meeting. At that point, the Finance Committee as well as the school board will take that feedback and we'll discuss as well and move forward with our recommendations. Okay, so I'm going to start with Article 2 because there's Article 1 is around positions available. So we'll start with Article 2. I'm going to read it again just so it's fresh with everyone, and then we'll open up to the floor. So Article 2 says to see if the Brookline School District will vote to raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $9,867,097. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $9,857,075, which is the same as last year, with certain adjustments required by previous action of the school district or by law, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. Majority vote required to pass. So at this point, I'm going to ask for any testimony in favor, and we'll allow a moment just for everyone to get off mute with our virtual environment here.
Mr. Chairman, Pete D'Agostino.
Hi, Pete. How are you?
Doing well, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity. I have about a million questions. I'll try to get it to 5. First of all, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the superintendent, the 8% tax cap that, resulted in the changes to the original proposal, is that being impacted by the loss of the one-time state aid that we had last year? Meaning, had we never had the state aid, would we have not bumped up against that limit, or is that not a function of that 8%? I just wanted to understand that.
Was that directed to me, Peter, or did you want?
to the superintendent, if he knows. Yeah.
Pete, I would say that the stabilization grant and that loss of revenue is exactly why we're bumping up against the tax cap.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I raised that, and I raised this when we voted through the tax cap, which I didn't support, and the reason being is that this is the exact situation that I spoke to at the meeting, is that we get into a situation where the administration is essentially forced to put forward what I'm going to suggest is a false budget, and I don't mean that in a negative connotation. What I mean is you're not putting forward maybe everything you normally would have because of an arbitrary tax cap. And I think you and I had the conversation, Andy, during the meeting when I asked you about this. I said, well, what if you come to us and you say, hey, I'm maxed out at, let's just call it 10 million, but we really need to hire a teacher. And there's not, because of all our other contractual obligations, I don't have the room in my budget. And then it was left up to us at the deliberative session to figure out how much money you needed for the teacher. And you basically were going to have to, present another slide to say, hey, this is what we could use if you're so willing to do it. So it creates this situation I don't like. I don't like that the administration's put in this situation. I raised my objection to it during the tax cap discussion, because what I would prefer is we see from you, and I know you don't have a say in this now because of the vote, everything you need, and then we can make adjustments and you can tell us what the impacts are, right? So the other thing is we're kind of getting a false positive here because we got, call $560,000 that everybody was completely transparent about the fact that we could not plan to see that again. So with all that being said, I applaud the effort of the administration to work through this. I think we're seeing the negative impacts of that taxing cap, and it may never happen again because we won't maybe have the funding. So I'll say it this way. I would strongly encourage the school board to conduct an in-person meeting. We need the ability to make adjustments at a deliberative session should the need arise. We have no idea what's going to happen in the next 60, 90 days with COVID or whatever the other things are. And I think we have to leave, given that the administration has no more flexibility because they've bumped up against this arbitrary number that we set. I think the board, I really think is incumbent on the board to, notwithstanding the logistical issues around it, we have to give deliberative session the flexibility to make adjustments to support the administration because they are out of options. So their only lever left is to come to deliberative session and explain to us what the issues are and allow deliberative session to make a decision. So I hope that we do in person only because we have a lot of unknowns that the administration will now not be able to address. And deliberative session will be their only ability to do that, as I understand it. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong about that. And the other question I had, so that's my pitch on in person. And the last question I had was, my understanding on this, the one-time aid, I forget what it was called, but the 560 grand, is that conversation really isn't dead. And so for Andy, do you think we could have some insight on that prior to deliberative session so we could potentially make adjustments, whether you would have the option to do it? I'm not sure how that would play in because of the limit, or you could ask us to do it at deliberative session. Do we think we'll have any indication as to the likelihood of that additional aid in time to make adjustments as necessary? Or is that something you would have the flexibility to do later? I'm just concerned, I guess what I'm getting at is I'm concerned that the administration's hands get tied a little bit here because of the one-time funding that we got last year. And if we don't meet in person, we're not going to be able to help fix it. And then we're just going to be left with some of these arbitrary things for a whole nother fiscal year. So I know I threw a lot at you, but I'd like to know if what I said was true, that your only lever to make adjustments would be deliberative session from this point, should there be an additional need that arose. And secondly, could we deal with the additional one-time aid if we got it again at deliberative session? Would we have time to make that adjustment? So I'll leave, if you know the answer to those two questions would be helpful.
Pete, you are absolutely correct that an in-person deliberative session is the only way the budget could be adjusted. With regard to the state aid, I think there is work being done. I don't know what that would result in. I don't necessarily foresee it being ready for deliberative session, but at the same time, if the state were to reimburse the district, the board could mandate that I take any adjustment that the vote is provided and encumber that and not allow me to spend it, and then it could be returned to the taxpayers in FY in June of 22.
Yeah.
So those would be the mechanisms that I think would be the best. And as far as the dollar amount, it's that 158,000 and change that I discussed in the cutting of the tech person at the RMMS and the 2 MTSS paras and the $850 for the tech.
Yeah, no, I understood where you got the money from. I thought, you did a good job. You and the team did a good job on that. I guess my concern is the MTSS, I think, could become more important as we move forward. Just speaking to my kids, certainly, anytime we do Zoom, it's there's just a curve right now. So I think the MTSS could be more important in the next fiscal year. And if the voters and the members of the deliberative session agreed with me, we would have the option to return that money back to the budget and allow you to move forward with that person. And you and the administration don't have the ability to make that decision now because of the limit. So again, I think we're not done with this budget yet. I think we have 2 more months of living through COVID to understand what else the administration may need. And for those reasons, and for the reason of not knowing exactly what the potential additional aid might be, again, I encourage the board to hold an in-person deliberative session to allow us to help the administration deal with things that we can't foresee at this time. So with that, I'll turn my time back over. But great job on the presentation, and thanks for making that clear. I apologize. One other comment: as this was probably the highest level of tax transparency I've seen in the last few years, showing the foregoing of the reductions. I appreciated that, so thank you for that. The only thing I would say is it may be helpful for deliberative session to show the 2019 tax rate, because the 2020 tax rate is not real. The $9 and something cents isn't real. I think when you look at the $10.74, if I'm not mistaken, that's almost exactly where we were in 2019 before we received the 600 grand. So I think it may be helpful just to show taxpayers that little dip was really related to the 600 grand, not because you guys are making some big swing in the budget. So just informational, because I think at 1074, if I'm not mistaken, that's exactly what it was in 2019. So those two bits of feedback, but that may just be helpful for people to understand that the swing is related to aid, not spending. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Drew Kellner, if I could jump in with a comment. I've got to host another call here at 7:30. I think Pete was speaking against the proposed budget because it's arguably a disaster that was our own making. There's not very many districts who have a tax cap and the SB2 system. Throw that in the middle of the pandemic, and we lost all of the flexibility that we used to have. And we as taxpayers, I think, did a pretty good job. The school board stewarded that through. The taxpayers that showed up at the meeting were diligent to make adjustments that were needed. But, Web Scales spoke against this on the floor at the meeting when the tax cap was put in. And, the attorney answered the question and basically said, well, the school board would have to put forward a budget, and then the superintendent may be put in the position of having to present an alternate needs budget, which is exactly where we are today, except we have to host a in-person deliberative session in order to make that adjustment. And I feel very badly that moderator Webb is going to be dragged into this, when just on Monday night, the select board voted to defer the in-person meeting till the 24th of March, with the expectation that we would be deferring that further because of concerns about in-person and having that number of people in the gymnasiums and some not feeling comfortable to come out. So here we are stuck in this position. And I think the only thing we can do is, as Pete mentioned, having that in-person session. And I truly hope that other taxpayers involved that come out understand that we probably want to keep that to a very brief session. It seems as though most of the warrant articles there were level funded from previous years. The only one I would say is in contention really is the Article 2. And I think the proper thing to do is to open the meeting, adjust that number to what the needs budget was, which was within the tax cap if you eliminate the stabilization grant that messed things up here, and then quickly go through the other warrant articles without a lot of discussion and adjourn so that we can limit the time there and move forward. But it seems like the best with a difficult hand we were dealt.
Great, thank you, Drew. Peter, I see you have your hand up.
Oh, that's probably just my mistake if I had that.
No, Peter Webb. Sorry, Pete. Yeah, different Pete.
And to Peter Webb, sorry for making you come to a meeting, but I hope we do it anyway.
Well, I'm pleased that the last three speakers agree that an in-person deliberative session is necessary to override the cap, but I'm wondering why they believe that.
Educate us.
What's that? We
I
have
said educate us.
Well, and I trust your judgment as well as your education, but I'm wondering if council has weighed in on this, because we have these virtual meetings which are in place of the traditional meetings, and I mean, I can see how it could go either way, but at a virtual first meeting, you folks could present your original cap governed budget, and then you have your input from the public, and then in the second, I don't know if you guys have had occasion to try to understand this alternative system, but there's a second virtual hearing at which you folks would make amendments to your budget. And I can't see how I'm not convinced that you don't have the freedom going through this alternative meeting system, which the legislature has given us for this 1 year, why you can't do what the public would do in overriding the cap.
Peter, I'd be happy to answer that. The virtual meeting does not allow us to ensure that the people making motions to change the budget are registered voters. We also would have no mechanism to tally the votes to make sure only registered voters in Brookline were voting on that change. The school board, even in the virtual realm, does not have the ability to change the number, only the taxpayers. So both Pete and Drew are accurate when they say that we would need to have an in-person meeting, and that has been confirmed with legal counsel.
Well, if legal counsel who specializes in these things has said that, I'll go with it, but I think they're erring on the side of prudence, contrary to safety. We have the additional issue of how we're going to create a responsible in-person meeting. That'll be somebody else's problem. But you can have your virtual meeting, you can present your budget, you can then, as this House Bill 1129 provides, take input from the voters, and then in the second virtual hearing, it's weird, I agree, and it disenfranchises the voters, but you get to make your own amendments as you deem fit to your budget. It's a system which has been created as an alternative to the orthodox traditional system. So why we don't fully treat it as that, I don't know. I agree with you that the disenfranchisement of the voters is less than if we have an in-person meeting. I just do not want to participate in an irresponsible public event.
Agreed.
Mr. Chairman, this is Pete D'Agostino, if I could. Is there the ability, you know, we have voters now when we do these meetings that sit at home and watch the meeting, and they're able to then come in and vote when Peter or whoever the moderator is, depending on the district, leaves a vote open. So as an alternative consideration, and I don't know all the rules, and I certainly have full faith and confidence in our moderator, but is there a possibility to virtually present the data and then allow for people to come in and vote to try and minimize, you know, some exposure? I just offer that as a
let's pause. There is a vote. There's a traditional vote under both systems. It's a ballot vote. There's a voting day. So the people do still vote on the warrant, which comes of the virtual meetings.
I meant on the deliberative session motions. I apologize.
Yeah, Peter, to answer your question, we always do and could continue to live stream our deliberative session. The motions obviously would be needed to be made from the floor. They would need to be seconded and basically move to a vote. Then our moderator could establish a time period of an hour or whatever he determines where people could come in and vote on that item and then leave. So you are correct. We could look at some of the safest ways to administer an in-person meeting, but we don't even know if we're there yet because ultimately the board will decide whether it's in person or virtual.
Yeah, the SB2 system, which was undoubtedly crafted by legislators with severe trust issues, ties the hands in many ways of our ability to work this system, because our ability to choose dates is so confined that we don't have the luxury, which our selectmen do, of moving this thing out for a while, letting the COVID problem settle down ideally, because we're locked in by the SB2 program, which is unbelievable. But, you know, Andrew, I know you got to defer to your counsel, and I know you have good counsel, and a good lawyer is going to err on the side of prudence, but this unquantifiable public health risk cannot be ignored.
Peter, I'm happy to go back to council again, you know, and address it. I just wanted to let you know it has been done.
Sure.
And Mr. Chair, I think in terms of the public input, we kind of need to move back to the discussion on the budget of the article.
Yes, I would.
Yep, agreed. So appreciate that. So we're going to move back. I'm going to ask for testimony against the proposed budget now. And again, I will ask one more time for both as well, for against warrant article number 2. So testimony against article 2.
This is Eric Power. I wanted to speak.
Hi, Eric.
Opposition. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. I know last year we passed a San teachers contract that gave teachers that are on step about a 3.8% raise. And again, they're going to get a 3.8% raise this year. And then 5.1% on top of that in the following year. And I wanted to know if those programmed increases are part of the operating budget, and were those considered? It looked like it was about $146,000 that was in our budget for last year. A further increase for this year of 171,000 rounded number. Is that number in the operating budget, Article 2?
Yes, when the contracts are standardized, the number goes into the budget, both the default and the operating.
Okay. This is maybe a next question I have is maybe a little bit of an accounting question. I noticed on page 11 and page 18, I see two different numbers for the tax effort. The one on page 11 says about 6.3 million. And the one on page 18 says about 5.9 million. It's different by about a little over $400,000. And I'm wondering if somebody could explain the difference there. I think it might have to do something with revenue, but I'm not quite understanding it.
Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that is a result of the surplus that we turned back as part of FY21, and that's why it's just over $400,000.
Right, FY20, there was a fund balance that moves forward into this year as revenue, and per the RSA, we are able to remove that in the calculation.
So that's why those numbers are different. Is that's the money that was used out of the unreserved fund balance from the previous year?
Right, so that slide is about the calculation, and the other number is about putting all of the revenue together.
Okay. I also had a question. I looked at that tech integrator position that was called out to bring in the budget in compliance with the tax cap, and it's $114,189. Is that really the cost of a single person to do that job with benefits and everything, or is that number just seems really high? Do we pay somebody that amount of money for that kind of work? Is that an accurate number?
That is everything, Eric. So that's your salary, your health benefits, your New Hampshire retirement benefits, your dental benefits, and anything else that your FICA, all of those pieces, how you arrive at that number.
Okay, so it adds up to be a 6-figure number.
Yeah, it's a fully loaded teaching position.
Okay. The thing I look at, you know, in testimony as a taxpayer, as well as, you know, a resident taking care of children, is we see even under the tax cap, we're going to see a 13.1% tax increase essentially. And without the tax cap, it would be a little higher at 15.6. So that's a little disconcerting to see double-digit percentage increases. And it doesn't make for a happy taxpayer, and it's hard for people to deal with that, especially when inflation by CPIU has only been 1.5%. We're seeing these increases that are gigantic. And I understand that some of it's due because we had a lower tax rate one time in 2019, but that was sort of eaten up by the town spending more money. So overall, the taxpayers are going to see a large increase. And I think the tax cap is actually making a difference. Just wanted to remind folks that the tax cap that was passed, as well as SB2, required a supermajority vote of 60%. So there was an overwhelming number of residents that support the tax cap because they really do want to balance taxes against, you know, education. We can't just keep spending without bound, and that's what's one positive thing about the tax cap. I agree that the revenue part of it is not a great thing, but I think that's a one-time thing that we're not going to see again. So I'm in opposition of this because I don't like seeing a double-digit percentage increase in the tax rate, and that's ultimately what we pay. And I know you've worked hard on trying to reduce it, but I'll hold my comments for the other warrant articles when they come up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else testimony in opposition of warrant article number 2?
Mr. Chairman, Pete D'Agostino, I don't know if I'm opposed or against, but I wanted to get some clarity on Eric's comments, maybe from Andy. He talked about a 13% increase, but that's it. You know, I would be curious to learn what the increase would have been had we not received $560,000 in one-time aid last year. Meaning, is this actually? You know, if I go to the store and get a coupon one time, I can't be mad the next time I go back and don't have a coupon. So we had a $560,000 coupon that we all decided to cash in on. I don't think the administration of the school board can be held accountable for the town then spending that money under their budget. And I still think that was okay. But I'd like to learn what the increase would be if we weren't, you know, counting this $560,000 coupon that we took last year against our taxes. Because I think the 13% is a little bit misleading, which is why I actually had suggested we look at the prior year before we had the coupon. So maybe that would be helpful for people to understand.
Yeah, just to quickly answer your question, Pete, the budget that we had proposed last month was a 4.1% increase. And the vast majority of that was mandated special ed costs of approximately $350,000 plus or minus. So when I add $350,000 worth of mandated cost and lose $560,000 in aid, I'm at $1 million before we even start the process.
So the answer is the real increase, if not for the one-time 560, the real increase that you're asking for, of which a majority is mandated by prior votes, is 4%. Is that accurate?
That's correct, and that's in the slides that we went over as what we call the original budget.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Hi, this is Webb Scales. Kelly, could I get some clarity? You said that the residue from the unreserved fund balance comes into the following year's budget as revenue. That revenue would serve to reduce the tax effort, right?
No, it actually, well, when you compare it against one year to the other, it does not. So the RSA allows you to take that out, and then your tax effort will actually go up because the tax effort is mostly the expense.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we aren't falling into another trap. I mean, we got nailed once because of a one-time state aid grant. And if we carry forward an unreserved fund balance, that's supposed to be returned to the taxpayers, which seems like it would reduce the effort for that year. And then the following year, we're in trouble because, well, last year's tax effort wasn't so big because we had an unreserved fund balance. So I just want to make sure we don't get trapped by that.
No, I don't think you're not getting tracked. The RSA requires us to take out that fund balance.
So when you say take out, you mean?
Of the calculation.
It gets removed from the
tax effort.
Okay. I just want to make sure that when you take it out, it doesn't reduce the tax effort.
No, it actually makes that number higher.
All right. Fair enough.
If you look at the slides, I think you might see how that would work.
Okay, so thank you, Allison. I see your information. We'll talk about that in our discussion. I do want to open up for one more time those in favor of warrant article number 2.
I have one small comment, which is I would appreciate it if at whatever deliberative session we actually reach, if the board could again present the items that we can't have because of the tax cap.
Okay, thank you. Okay, one more time, the testimony in opposition of warrant article number 2. Okay, hearing none, thank you for your input on Article 2. We're going to move to Article 3. So warrant Article 3 is to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate a sum of $75,000 to be added to the previously established school facilities maintenance expendable trust fund. This sum is to come from the June 30th unassigned fund balance available for transfer on July 1st, 2021. No amount to be raised from taxation. We'll ask for testimony in favor, please. Okay, hearing none. Testimony in opposition.
Yes, this is Eric Power.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yes. I see that we have a ending balance of $50,000 and we're replenishing it with $75,000. So it's actually growing a little bit. And I would consider having that be a little bit lower, maybe bring it down to what's the proposed use, because I don't think the times we're in right now is the time to keep tax money back from the taxpayers. I would recommend maybe moving that down to 50,000 or 53,000, something on that order, so that money can be returned to the taxpayers and the fund stays the same without having to grow it. Thank you.
Thank you.
A point of clarity, we're actually getting it back to the balance that we've been holding for several years.
Okay, I'm going to ask for testimony in favor again, please.
This is Webb Scales. I'm generally in favor of this. I think it's important to be able to take care of maintenance. My request is there any way we can strike that phrase about no money to be raised from taxation? Because it really is misleading. You guys have done a great service by adding to that verbiage with the phrasing about how we will be foregoing a tax cut. But foregoing a tax cut versus raising our taxes is pretty close to the same thing.
We will look at that language, Webb, and ask our attorney. But I believe that was recommended language from legal, but we'll ask again.
Yeah, it's certainly true that this year's taxes are not going to pay for that. But this year's taxes also wouldn't pay for it if we got rid of it. In fact, we would be saving money on our taxes if we got rid of it. So
Agreed, agreed.
thank
I
you.
will ask again.
Thanks, Webb. Okay, testimony in opposition. Very good. Thank you. We're going to move to Article 4. Article 4, to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate a sum of $25,000 to be added to the previously established Special Education Expenditure Trust Fund. This sum to come from the June 30th unassigned fund balance available for transfer on July 1st, 2021. No amount to be raised from taxation. So testimony in favor, please. Okay, testimony in opposition.
Yes, this is Eric Power. I wanted to get an answer on why the balance of 225 was selected. It seems like 200,000 would be reasonable and that we could, stay at that level and, and give taxpayers a little bit of break where we could. I don't know if there's an answer to that.
We had come up with the approximately 225, looking at the cost of an unanticipated out-of-district placement along with transportation. We can range anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000 for a student who is required to go out of district. And we're planning a budget 18 months away. If somebody moves in this summer and they have a child that needs those services, we're legally mandated to find that money. So I know the 200,000 seems like a lot, but an out-of-district special education placement has become very, very expensive.
Okay. Testimony in favor, please, for Article 4. Hearing none, we'll move one more time. Testimony in opposition. Okay, I'm going to move down to Article number 5 now. To see if the school district will vote to establish a contingency fund for the current year for unanticipated expenses that may arise, and further to raise and appropriate a sum of up to $40,000 to go into said fund. This sum to come from the unassigned fund balance available for transfer on July 1st, 2021. So ask for testimony in favor, please. Okay, testimony in opposition.
This is Eric Power. I had a question about this fund. Is there a balance for this fund, or is it one that lapses and only lasts 1 year? And do we have one from the previous year?
Eric, it lapses each year. So if the voters don't approve the money, it's returned to the taxpayers and the fund doesn't exist.
So this year, do we have $40,000 in a contingency fund that was approved last year, and so it would be neutral in terms of taxpayer?
Correct.
So because it's not a trust fund, because we don't call it the official, per the RSA, a trust or whatever, it has to be renewed yearly?
That is correct. It does not accumulate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, testimony in favor.
This is Webb Scales. Did we expend this money during the current year, or do we plan to expend this money, or will it become part of the unassigned fund balance?
Right now, we have not encumbered any of this money. We're projecting, I think at our last revenue and expense report, a surplus of about $25,000 to $30,000 right now. Obviously, if COVID expenses or something changed in the second semester, we may have to go to the contingency fund, but we have not encumbered it at this point.
Okay, testimony in opposition.
This is Matt Malo. I just wanted to provide some context and why I would be voting against this particular article this year. And it really does come down to federal assistance that was recently passed by Congress that will inject $154 million into New Hampshire through the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. Those dollars will be distributed by the New Hampshire Department of Education, and I'm confident that those amounts will far exceed any COVID costs that our school district may incur. And as a result, while this funding may be helpful, I don't anticipate a need to dip into it given that funding revenue or that new revenue stream, and we'll be voting no.
Just to clarify for you, Matt, the funding that you're talking about will be administered via the Title I formula. And when that funding came out in the first half of this year, the Brookline School District got about approximately $20,000. There are districts in New Hampshire whose Title I recipients will get $5 to $7 million. We do not have that many students in our district that qualify. So as a result, the resources that we will receive will not be what many people think. This is totally different than when the governor decided that he would do $200 per student. That worked very well for Brookline. The Title I formula is not something that works in our favor at all. And I think we received as an SAU less than $50,000 for the Brookline, for Hollis, and the co-op based on the Title I formula for the money that was distributed in the first half of the year.
The total was around 30,000.
Just to follow up on that, and as a point of further clarification, perhaps, Superintendent, this new funding that was passed at the end of 2020 is far greater than what was provided in the original CARES Act. I don't have the dollar numbers offhand, but can you confirm that is a substantial increase compared to what we saw in the CARES Act round one?
I think the total dollars are an increase, so we'll see some increase, Matt. I just don't want it to be that it's going to be an exorbitant number. I mean, there's still a lot of steps between when the federal government passes something and when it actually shows up at the district's door. So I don't want to discount your point that we'll be receiving aid. I just didn't, when you say $154 million, that sounds massive. And we have not seen as much aid as I would like to see distributed to all students, because I think COVID has impacted all students across the state of New Hampshire.
And this is Eric Power. I wanted to bring up something else. I noticed in the warrant on page 38 of the packet, we have Article 7, 8, and 9. And specifically, I want to bring attention to Article 9, which talks about retaining the unreserved fund balance up to, and I think the proposal was up to 2%. And I wanted to know if this is going, this $40,000 will be in addition to that. If Article 9 passes, are they going to be able to take the 40,000 plus the 2%, or does the 40,000 count as part of the 2%? And I didn't see that Article 9 was even discussed at all tonight. I don't know why we didn't talk about it. Maybe because it's just budget, but maybe you can explain that. But I think it's relevant to this this article, why we have Article 9 and the relationship to this article we're talking about now.
I'm happy to address that, Eric. First of all, we are going to cover Articles 7, 8, and 9 as part of the public hearing. There wasn't a dollar impact, so we didn't put that into the slides. We presently have the system you're referring to at the co-op, where we have both a contingency and an unreserved fund balance. I would anticipate that over time, as the fund balance for Article 9 was, if approved by the voters and supported, that we could look at the elimination of the contingency. Right now, we're building a budget not knowing if the voters will support Article 9. So we're trying to bring in a safety net for the FY22 budget.
What would the 2% be if that passed? What could the school board retain? How does that get calculated? And what would that be for this year? Assuming we did the tax cap funded budget, would it be 2% of that number?
It would, I forget the exact calculation and I couldn't tell you that tonight. I can certainly have that ready in the future. But the school board can set that number at any amount they want to, from 0 to that 2% in this case. And for instance, in Hollis and in co-op, they both have a percentage, and they don't, the amount that they use is less than the percentage that the voters voted.
Okay. We're going to move to Article 6 now. Shall the voters of the Brookline School District adopt a school administrative unit budget of $1,953,257 for the forthcoming fiscal year, in which $361,236 is assigned to the school budget of this school district? This year's adjusted budget of $1,918,864 with $354,875 assigned to the school budget of this school district will be adopted if the article does not receive a majority vote of all the school district voters voting in the school administrative unit. So I'm asking for testimony in favor, please.
Mr. Chairman, Pete D'Agostino.
Go ahead, Pete.
I think this is more under the public hearing and maybe not this specific article, but I would like to, for the board's in consideration, I would volunteer to assist the board, the administration, and our moderator in finding an alternative venue to conduct a deliberative session for all of these articles. So I just offer that for the board's consideration. I would be willing to assist in seeing if we can get a bigger space. I think the moderator's comments are well received given the potential risk, but we also have limited legal options in moving this. So I think it relates to all of the warrants. So I hope that's appropriate to say, but you can put me down to assist the moderator and others with doing that. So just for the board's consideration as you get into that later on tonight.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move to testimony in opposition, please.
This is Webb Scales. I don't mean to be cynical or anything, but I don't see any point in debating this article. There's nothing that this body can do to change it. Yes, the board members here are our representatives to the SAU board, but it's the SAU board which sets this number, and it's just parceled out to the local districts, and we can't change it.
Thank you,
This is Eric Power. I did attend the meeting in late December between Christmas and New Year's where this was set, where there was a chance for public input, and I appreciate that opportunity. I do think that this SAU budget is unsustainable. It's the amount of money we're spending there is a lot. 15 years ago, we were spending about $308 a student. Now we're going to be spending over $800 a student just for SAU costs. And I think I'd rather be spending money on teachers than administrators, to be honest. So we have to find a way to control this. And I did have a question, and I think I know the answer, but I want to double check. The SAU budget as a whole went up 7.9% if memory serves me correctly, and which I think is 5 times the rate of inflation that we've seen, which I don't think is acceptable. But even worse than that, I'm seeing the Brookline share is 9.5%. Is that because of the apportionment formula of the SAU budget that we are seeing 9.5 instead of the 7.9%?
Yes, Eric.
Thank you. I'm not happy about it.
Okay. Ask for testimony in favor one more time. And testimony in opposition. Okay, we're going to move to article number 7. Shall the school district accept the provisions of RSA 198:20/B, providing that any school district at an annual meeting may adopt an article authorizing indefinitely until specific rescission of such authority, the school board to apply for, accept, and expend without further action by the school district, unanticipated money from a state, federal, or other governmental unit or a private source which becomes available during the fiscal year. We'll ask for testimony in favor, please. Okay, testimony in opposition.
This is Webb Scales. So is this going to remove the item from the warrant that we see every year that says we approve the board to receive state catastrophic special education aid?
Yes, this allows us to have a much broader ability to accept funds. And this kind of comes about as we had to go for separate authorization to the boards for the COVID funds that were released to us.
All right, well, I think it would be wonderful to get rid of that warrant article because no one in their right mind would vote against it. On the flip side, it will be tragic to have it go because every year under SB2, we see about 10% of the voters voting against receiving federal state aid. And having that little litmus test there is sort of a proof of concept, sort of a test of who is actually paying attention when they vote. And so it'll be sad to see that go.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, another follow-up question, I think a little bit to Webb's point, or maybe it made me think of it. Would this warrant article be impacted by the adoption of a budget committee? Because I already have grave concerns about a budget committee setting a budget without the input of the school board, who is, charged with being our representative and the representative of the kids. So would this warrant article, if approved, I have no idea what people think about it, but would be further impacted by a budget committee, or would this help to give the board flexibility should a budget committee be enacted?
Pete, I don't think it would give the board greater flexibility, but the board would still have the authority to accept the funds. So I don't see how a budget committee would impact this either way.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, one more round. Testimony in favor, please. Okay, testimony in opposition. All right, thank you. We're going to move to number 8, Article 8. So this is, if Article 7 passes, this article is unnecessary. To see if the school district voters will authorize the Brookline School District to access future year, state, and federal special education aid funds in the event that special education costs exceed budget limitations. So looking for testimony in favor, please.
Okay, I think we should do this.
Thank you. Testimony in opposition. Testimony in favor. Testimony in opposition. Very good, thank you. Okay, Article 9. To see if the school district will vote to authorize indefinitely until rescinded to retain any unused portion of the year-end unassigned general funds from the preceding fiscal year and subsequent fiscal years, provided that the amount of year-end unassigned general funds does not exceed in any fiscal year 2%, can be up to 5%, of the current fiscal year's net assessment under RSA 198:5. Looking for testimony in favor, please. Okay, testimony in opposition.
This is Eric Power. I just had a question about this particular warrant article. So if we pass this at 2%, does that, at the end of the year, we look at the budget that was, I guess it says it uses the net assessment. So the money, once it gets up to 2%, you stop putting money in it. You can't do 2% a year. It's a 2% that you can keep in total. That's my question.
Do you want me to answer that, Andy?
Oh, sure, Kelly, I'm sorry.
That's okay. It is not an accumulative balance. It's a one-year deal, just like the other contingency fund. It goes back to the taxpayers if it's not used.
So say we had a rare circumstance where the budget went down and this was larger, and they would actually have to reduce that money and put it back to the taxpayers to stay within the 2% if we had passed this. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I understand that. Can you repeat?
Yes. Say we had a budget of $10 million and we had it funded 2% at the end of that year. And the following year, say the budget went down to $9 million. We would not be able to keep the same amount of money. It would have to go down to match the 2% of the $9 million.
Yeah, you're right. You would just approve a different number, or the school board could approve, 1%. There's a lot of flexibility to what the school board can approve on a year-to-year basis. But
the 2% is the upper bound, though.
The 2% is the upper bound.
Okay.
And it's something that's discussed every August after we go through the audit, Eric, and the board has to formally vote on what they're going to retain.
So I had a question sort of along Peter D'Agostino's lines. If this money is in this, does it require a vote just of the school board to expend it, or does the school board and the budget committee both have authorization that has to be approved to spend it?
That is what is different about this legislation that has renewed this. They raised it to 5%, actually. And then the other piece of that is that a retained fund balance used to require budget committee approval, school board approval, and the DOE's approval. And now it only requires a public hearing.
So given the fact that it only requires a public hearing, that's simply notice. The board has set it at 2%, and the board will retain 2%, and ain't nothing nobody can say about it.
Yeah,
Other
I
than
guess.
voting out the board and putting a new one in.
Right, but it can only be funded if there's enough funds from the previous year. But what's expended has to have a public hearing.
So there's a bunch of hairy details around this. The unreserved fund balance is money that wasn't expended from the previous year's budget. And so the board and the administration have decided not to spend that money. And then anything above 2% will be returned to the taxpayers. It doesn't really get returned to the taxpayers. Instead of raising new taxes, we use the old money, but it has the effect of benefiting the taxpayers.
Yes.
What happens to the 2%? Does that come into the new budget as revenue? Does it get added as a budget item line? There's just this money there that's left over from the previous budget that we get to spend next year? How is that?
It gets returned to the taxpayer, so it would reduce the taxes. However, I would assume that the voters will vote, the school board will vote to retain money in the following year. So if you kept that number the same for 5 years, you would give it back and take it at the same time.
Well, but if it weren't for the 2% rule, then the 2% would be returned to the taxpayers because it's an unreserved fund balance. It gets returned unless we do something else with it. So thanks to the 2%, it does not have to be returned to the taxpayers.
Correct.
And so the next year's budget is whatever we enact plus 2% of the previous year's budget. I mean, it's not part of the budget, but there's extra money.
Well, yes, but each year you would assume that you're going to keep that balance. So you're returning it at the end of the year and taking it again at the beginning of the year.
Okay. I don't really want it returned and taken. I want it,
Well,
held and spent
it's
when
a
needed.
figurative way. I'm not literally saying you do that.
You're correct, Peter. It would be held and spent, but it has to be spent after a public hearing with board approval.
Right.
This is Eric here. I had a question about the order at which the school board fills these reserve funds. I see that we have at least 4 this year. We have 75,000 for the maintenance expendable trust. We have 25,000 for the special education expendable trust. Then we'd have this RSA 195.5 fund. Do they fill, if there's not enough money left, do they fill them first in the order they were on the warrant? Is there any advantage to putting Article 9 up higher so that they could fill that first if the school board chose to do it? I'm just trying to understand the implications of where it is in the warrant ordering wise.
The order of how they're written is how they are filled. The board can take that under consideration as it is their warrant, and if they wanted to renumber them or put them in a different order, that would be their choice.
My input on that would be to put that one first, because I think that's more of a general purpose contingency fund. I think that gives more flexibility than putting them into the specific funds. I think that would, if I was judging, I would put that one ahead of the others, but that's my input for consideration.
Okay, thank you. We're going to do one more time for testimony in favor, please. Okay, and testimony in opposition. All right, last article, number 10. This one reads, to transact any other business which may legally come before said meeting. So looking for testimony in favor, please. Testimony in opposition. Testimony in favor. Testimony in opposition. Very good, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna close our public hearing at 8:08. Thank you everyone for your input today. Appreciate it. We're gonna move over now. At this point, the board and finance committee will discuss these warrant articles in greater depth after hearing your input and seeing the overview. Okay. So we are we're moving to a discussion around the data presentation first, though. So Gina, the floor is yours.
Okay, give me one moment.
Sure. Yeah.
Oops, wrong one.
Can you bear? I'm sorry, Gina. I just need to check to see if we have to officially come back into our meeting here.
We had simply recessed the hearing for the public. We had recessed the board meeting for the public hearing.
Thank you. Okay. Yep. We look good. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so if we're ready, I presented content regarding data in November or December of 2018, and I wanted to provide an update. So last spring, the state of New Hampshire canceled state testing due to the pandemic. During the summer, mid our reopening planning, we were made aware that we would be required to complete fall testing for the state of New Hampshire. We were told that this would be quite beneficial to districts, as we would be able to refine our curriculum and adjust our instruction based on the information we would get from these. The testing that we completed this October was not summative testing, which is what we typically do. It was interim testing, and we tested prior year skills. So fourth graders took a third grade interim test to see how they did on the prior year's content, as they had not been assessed on that. Our fourth graders this spring will complete summative testing for fourth grade material. So this is just a in-between assessment so that we can get a little bit of information since we skipped last spring. All right, taking a look at our results. You'll see that it's a little bit different than what we typically present because I don't have state level data. That information was not provided to us. So we're only taking a look at how our own students perform. So looking at our English language arts, our grade 3 skills, that's of course our 4th graders. Grade 4 is our 5th graders. Grade 5 skills is our 6th graders. Those are relatively stable in comparison to our typical performance, with our grade 3 skills being a little bit lower than typical. And then if you take a look at our math scores, our average grade 3 skills, so our current grade 4 students and our current grade 6 students did see a dip from where they traditionally perform, with our grade 5 students holding tight pretty close to where they typically are. Across the entire SAU 41, math seems to have been impacted more so than English language arts. And I would say that math time in our elementaries gets 60 to 75 minutes a day for instruction, with a lot of individualized instruction provided. When we are in person, we have flex time, we get extra help from the teachers, extra help from our specialists. In the area of math, especially, that is true all the way up through Cav Block in our high school. So not being present last spring certainly had an impact. All right, so as we already mentioned earlier today, it's difficult to understand the way they provide information. Overall, student scores range from a 1, 2, 3, or 4. Students who earn a 3 or a 4 on a summative assessment are deemed to be proficient. Students who earn a 1 or a 2 are not proficient. Individual standards within the content area are evaluated on a performance distribution of 1, 2, or 3. So 1s are below standard, 3s are achieved the standard comfortably, and 2s are either met the standard or nearly met the standard. So those have to be further divided up and eventually pushed over to the proficient or pushed over to the not proficient range. And so those are the areas where we really want to take a look at how do we provide a little bit more instruction to kind of push those students up into the proficient range for a summative. So with an interim, we're able to drill down question by question for grade level trends and also for individual students. So as a result, I'm just going to take a quick moment to go through our ELA individual standards. So we're looking at our language standards, and we're looking at reading standards for informational text. You take a look at our fall language standards. The blue represents our current grade 4. This particular area was a relative weakness for that particular cohort, whereas reading our informational text was an area of strength for all of our grade levels. If you look over at reading standards for literature and speaking and listening standards, once again, over here, we had a relative weakness over here with our current grade 4 students. So this gives us the opportunity to pay additional attention this year and provide additional support to the students in those specific standards. Moving over to writing. Writing is an interesting one to evaluate. It's scored by a computer and sometimes produces invalid scores. Specifically, we teach our students to turn the question around when responding to a question. So we're writing incomplete sentences and utilizing the prompt to assist us. Sometimes that confuses the computer and results in a score that it appears as though the student had copied and nullifies the score. So looking at the results here, it's less telling for us. However, if you look at individual rubrics within the writing standards, we have relative strengths in conventions and organization. And an area for improvement would be providing relevant evidence. So once again, we're relying on a computer to determine whether or not the supporting evidence students have provided in writing was deemed relevant by the computer. So we're always looking for students to provide supporting evidence from the text or from outside sources, and so this just goes along with what we do when we teach writing. Looking at math, we have measurement, data, and geometry. And if you take a look at this relative weakness for our current grade 6 students, these standards were covered when we weren't present. Some of them we didn't get to last spring for some of our students. So as a result, that was an area that was a little bit more challenging for our students when they returned after 3 months off for the summer to take that. So that is where our 6th grade students start. We start with those areas that we didn't cover in grade 5 because of remote learning, and then we just forge ahead. So that was not necessarily a shock. And if you look at numbers and operations and fractions, a particular weakness for our current 4th graders was in that category. And once again, that's a topic that's covered right at the end of the school year. So it goes along with what we understood to be areas and standards that were a little bit more challenging given the format of our spring remote learning. Moving on to number and operations in base 10, that's a relative strength for all of our grade levels. And that just shows you that we have really good number sense across the board, and we do a very consistent job. Also, we're pretty strong in operations and algebraic thinking, especially for our current grade 4 and current grade 5 students. Another thing we want to take a look at is performance over time, but I caution us when we do this because we're comparing apples to oranges to bananas and to, who knows, pick another fruit this year. But in 2016, we had paper smarter balanced assessment. This was not computer adaptive. In 2017, we moved to computer adaptive smarter balanced. So in 2016, we were compared against students who took an adaptive test and we did not. In 2017, we switched formats altogether. So that was a very different assessment. Between 2017 and 2018, those are the only, between 2018 and 2019, those are the only 2 consecutive years of the same test format. Because from 2017 to 2018, we switched from Smarter Balance to New Hampshire's statewide assessment system, so a different assessment. And then here we are this fall. It's an interim assessment, not a summative, so it's not quite as thorough, and it's ever so slightly different. But you could take a look at this English language arts performance, and we are relatively stable across those 5 years. If you take a look at our district's performance over time in math, we do see a little bit of dipping this year. And as I mentioned, our math instruction really relies on that close personalized instruction that is easier to achieve in the classroom, working sometimes one-on-one or in small groups with the teacher as we typically do. Another important thing to do is take a look at one cohort over time. This is a challenge because our last year 6th graders took the assessment as 7th graders, so they're mixed with our Hollis students over at the co-op, so we can't necessarily break down that data to take a look at how they've been doing. So what we do have is the blue is our current 6th graders and the red is our current 5th graders. You look at our English language arts performance over time, our 6th graders are pretty stable over time, 72 to 64 to 72.9, relatively stable. And if you take a look at our current 5th graders, 65 to 78.9%, so an improvement. If you take a look at our math, there's greater stability with our 5th grade cohort than there is with our 6th grade cohort. But once again, we're taking a look at those individual standards and addressing them in the classroom, potentially with some MTSS paras in the future. But when we look at cohorts over time, we look for consistency. We identify any particular outliers for a given year. We're able to drill down with this interim assessment to take a look at outliers within specific questions to see if potentially the wording is what was particularly challenging for a group. We also looked to see if there were significant changes to enrollment, to see if there was a huge move-in in a particular grade. And then in this year, in 2020, we reflect on possible remote learning gaps that were created based on the world going into a pandemic and learning a little bit more independently last spring and returning to the classroom this year in a very different classroom environment.
Hey, Gina.
Yes.
Is that, so above in math, it looked like there was the gap you talked about, I think it was fractions. Is that dip there? Is that like the March to June units that we're seeing there where it's just a lag? Is that like the smoking gun that you're seeing jump out for that class of 2027 dip in math? Or are we still looking at kind of the gaps? I mean, that's just a fairly significant jump. It almost feels like there's a whole unit missed or something.
Yeah, so that's exactly what we're doing. We're looking at individual standards, but then drilling down to the individual questions. So fractions, we don't just start them in grade 3, but that's where we really do a lot of prep work prior to that. But that is a unit that is taught in the spring when we were in remote learning. So it was taught, but the extent to which we taught it the way we typically do was very different. And then the same is true for the measurement and data for our current grade 6. That was last spring. So definitely not surprised to see that those were areas that were a little bit more challenging for our students.
Thank you.
Yep. And, you know, as I always say, state level data and local assessments provide only one piece of the puzzle, and there's so much more, especially in the middle of a pandemic where we have to really take into consideration the social and emotional well-being of our students and just the day-to-day interactions. And if we can provide that stable environment for our students, then the learning comes after that. So thank you. I would comment that I know it's difficult to take a look at this and make sense of it because it's presented in a way that's different from every other year. And we are comparing very different assessments year over year, but it's still important to take a look at it and try to determine what is it that we can learn from the information being presented to us.
Thank you. Are there any questions at all before we move to the deliberation session?
I just want to make a quick comment and commend the fact that in the midst of everything that you are all going through administratively and what you're doing for our kids, you're staying the course for the community as well by taking this data, synthesizing it as best you can. It is not apples to apples, but it's putting something out there for us. I think like this is the year that you have every excuse to just bypass that, and many people wouldn't even notice. But the fact that on top of everything else that you are all doing, that you're putting this out there and you're giving us this information, it just, it's incredibly important. And I think it just speaks not just to identifying the needs, because in my opinion, I agree, it's just one small piece of the puzzle, but it just speaks to the fact that you recognize the need to keep proceeding as normal as best as you can. And I just want you to know that I noticed that and really commend the work that you've done. Thank you guys so much.
Very good. Thank you, Erin. Okay. At this point, we're going to move over to our deliberations. So the first item on the agenda here is the School Board and Finance Committee around the proposed warrant articles that we discussed earlier in the public hearing. So we'll go down article by article here. I have to read these verbose warrants one more time to put them on the floor. So I'll read these, then I'll ask for a motion to recommend as presented, and then we can have our discussion once it's on the floor. So we'll start with Article 2. To see if the Brookline School District will vote to raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $9,867,097. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $9,857,075, which is the same as last year, with certain adjustments required by previous action of the school district or by law, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, sections 10 and 16, to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. A majority vote required to pass. So we'll need a motion to recommend Article 2 as presented, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. So that motion's now on the floor. So I'm looking for input both from the board as well as the Finance Committee, please.
I had a question about one of the charts that was presented earlier for Andy. Let me see, we had a chart. Let me see, what was that called? Unfortunately, it doesn't really have page numbers on this. BSD tax rate info. It was right before the title chart for the warrant articles. It had all the details of the tax rate. Just a couple more, few more slides upward. Yep, the next one before that. That's it, right there. Nope, the next one. Nope, go down to, it's BSD tax rate info, that one, yep. So my question for Andy is, this calculates the total BSD tax rate as being 13.1%. How does that reconcile with the tax cap of 8%?
Kelly, can you jump in and assist me?
Right. The thing that isn't as obvious here is the tax base is factored into this. So you're dividing what we're anticipating tax base to be a 1.5% increase, and that is divided into the total tax effort.
All right, so the difference in the tax base accounts for the difference between the 13% difference versus the 8%. So if we kept the tax base the same,
presumably, yes.
Yes, then it would have been. All right, so if this is an increase, so would this be saying this is, wouldn't the 13% then be if the tax base were the same and the 8% would include the increase? Because I would expect if you increase the tax base, then this would be a smaller increase, wouldn't it? Yeah, I'll have to think that one through, but all right. But it's related to the tax base then.
Yes, I would, yes.
All right.
That
All
would
right,
be.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just quickly, Allison, you had put some data up that I just want to note too that I think is kind of relevant to the topic here.
Yeah.
When we were talking about the tax rates. So do you want to go ahead and just share what you had found for 2019 and 2020
Yeah, so
as it pertains?
I pulled it from the annual report from 2019, and we had, so in case anybody still has their old book, that's where I'm pulling my information from. So I saw Brian has his. So I'm not pulling this out of the air. I don't have any secret documentation anywhere. That's where I got, and that's in the blue section, and at the very back or somewhere in page 172 is where I actually pulled it out. On FY19, our total tax rate for 19 was supposed to be $10.90. For FY20, before we had that grant, was supposed to be $11.28. And then the FY21 estimate was supposed to be $10.48.
So that's just good information because as what we have on the table here for FY22, we're talking the original before the tax cap was 1117, but with the tax cap, it's at 10.94. So that going back to even to 2019, then we're essentially flat there.
Right.
So just a good data perspective. I think some folks were asking about that and hinting at that earlier. So that's the actual figure now that we can share.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any other questions or comments on this one from the team?
So just so I understand, a vote for this is the 8% constraint budget. A vote against it would then trigger a deliberative session in person.
No, not necessarily. If I think the deliberative session is another topic that we're going to have here, whether we want to have that in person or not. So either way, whatever we come forward with will be on the floor. If we have an in-person deliberative session, that can be changed as part of that meeting.
I just added an additional clarification. So the board is required to vote to put the tax cap budget on the warrant. The board can take a separate vote to recommend or not recommend. So you are required to put it there. Then you can make a separate decision about your recommendation.
Okay.
Gina, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we put the like when we're voting to recommend this, it really comes across as either we are recommending either this tax cap budget or the alternate budget, the 10,000 left budget. Thank you, Erin. Words escape me at this point.
So when you recommend a budget 2.5 or 0.5, there's no story that goes with it. That's the only language on the warrant. So folks who haven't listened to this conversation or the deliberative session or virtual or whatever ends up happening, they'll have to develop their own conclusion, and it could be whatever that conclusion is. But in the conversation, you can, I just wanted to let you know what your legal obligations were.
Right. I just feel like when we put a vote out there, and it's because of the way it's worded on the warrant article and the way it's presented, when we vote on it, it always is presented in to me, if you're not listening to any of this, and there are a lot of people who don't listen to any of this, let's be honest, it comes across as either we're voting in favor of the first thing, or if we're not in favor of that first thing, then we're for the second thing. Do you know what I'm saying? But maybe that's just my own personal perception.
And if I recall, though, if this gets altered in the deliberative session, we do a revote of whether or not we recommend the changed article. So if whatever we vote here is just going to stand until deliberative session, or unless this doesn't change. If there's a deliberative session and this changes, we'll revote whether to recommend the new one.
That is correct.
But it's a good point. It's like, if we're thinking one thing when we're voting right now, we don't know what's going to happen because we haven't deliberated on the next thing. So I see your point. It's a conundrum, Allison, and I feel the same way. If we don't like either of the options, there's the fear that there's the risk that we're sending a message, whether intended to or not, to that we support the default budget, say, or this budget, whatever it is that we're thinking, and that's not the intent. But I guess that's just how the position that we're in.
Right. Thank you for that clarification, though, Erin.
So I agree with that. One other question I had as I was thinking about tonight's presentation, and the paras are roughly, the MTSS rather, paras are roughly 40K. So what is the hiring period around that? Because I'm thinking about the contingency budget, where we could go forward with a public hearing with that if we really deem that appropriate and necessary based on the test scores, and we can show that. That's available in July. Is that roughly within the timing of when we would move forward if we wanted to do that for a hiring of those? And does that work?
I think you have the potential to do that. As I said earlier during the budget presentation, we still have people to hire for our retirees. So there may be salary differential that comes from those.
Yep.
We could see somebody potentially change insurance, go to their spouse's insurance. So, we're talking about tonight's reality. 6 months from now, we may have enough in the budget to fund those 2 MTSS paras.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm just saying that from what we're discussing here. To me, those may be the biggest need from what we're seeing and talked about in the past. And I think, Andy, to your point, the budget is flexible and it may not be the 43K as of tonight, but in keeping with the tax cap and then having the transparency with the public, that might be an option too. I would just throw out there as we're thinking about this.
I do appreciate the ability to adapt with the technology specialist, and to realize whether the viability and the need for that position. And I do have a question though. We go for the REAP grant on a lot of the technology that we have, and this has been a question in my head, and I know that there's policy out there, and I think I came on way after this policy was developed, and I just have a question in my head about it. But there's like programs like Donors Choose that we've never used, and I don't understand. I see Gina's face over there already. So explain to me why we don't go through programs like that.
Go ahead, Gina.
I was going to defer to Kelly on the Donors Choose, because that typically comes from her office. But in terms of the REAP, we do have specific activities or items that are eligible for it. So we talked about the REAP grant over the summer when we needed to reduce class size to bring students in to make sure we had the physical distancing. So that position isn't necessarily eligible under REAP grant, while computer technology is eligible for that. So with every position or discussion, we have to look at what are our available funding sources, and can I be creative with this? And so when we really try to identify what are we going to do, let's go line by line. Trust me, we went line by line down to do we need to buy balls for physical education? Everything. And we argued our points back and forth, and this was the recommendation that we came up for now. If we had to, if we are bound by this tax cap budget, what would cost the least in terms of least impact for our students? So that's where we came forward. But Kelly, as I mentioned, is our Donors Choose person.
I'm the person. Donors Choose has, well, any GoFundMe page, if you will, has liability associated with it. It also takes some of the control out of our hands as we try to make everything consistent, and that something doesn't favor one teacher or one area more than another. So we prefer to use our own donor system, which it goes through My School Bucks. Anyone can make donations to the school that way, and perhaps we haven't done a really great job of advertising that out there, but that gives the school district and the administration a lot more control about how we get those funds.
I would argue that we, no offense, we have not done a great job of that, because I think we really need to promote that a little better.
No, I did say that. I said,
no, I know.
Done.
Because had I known that, like, we need to hit up our teachers to say, hey, I need that projector, because there are people out there who will gladly donate money towards getting their teacher a projector or getting their kids those stools that they need, and there are families that are willing to contribute to that sort of thing. And I think maybe we have our PTO kind of help get the word out for us.
Well, that would be great, because that really is the roadblock. There is someone needs to coordinate those efforts, and
I'm totally volunteering our PTO without ever asking them.
Wow, they appreciate you so much right now.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
So I just have a procedural comment. When are we going, at what point do we discuss the meeting stuff? I know that was part of the discussion, but is there a vote on what we're going to do?
Well, we actually did not. I gave an overview. The intent was to bring it back as a topic. I think from what I've heard from the board, some point during deliberations, we want to discuss virtual versus in person and then take a vote on that so we have our guidance. And I'm happy to give you my input when we get to that piece.
I kind of feel like that would have been good to do first, but here we are. I just feel like that's a piece that can inform some of the decisions that we're going to make now.
Well, you've taken no action. So if as a board you wanted to, I'll say, delay this conversation for a moment, I can give you my thoughts on in-person versus virtual. That may be helpful because with the board chair's permission, I'll do that. Because,
yep.
Okay. I've heard the concern raised by the citizens on that $158,000, and I greatly respect that, and I greatly appreciate their willingness to put together an in-person meeting. When I look at the budget, I propose cuts that would be real if we had to make them. And as I said earlier, the RMMS tech position, though valuable, we have made strides, leaps and bounds from where we were because we were forced to do that. So I am comfortable with that. We may see a need in the future where it has to come back because we're looking at a different skill set. I am also comfortable, obviously, with the $850 to REAP. You saw the data tonight, and I do believe the MTSS positions have value. Remember that we had one in this present year's budget that we chose to allocate differently based on COVID. That position will come back as an MTSS. So you will have one in the budget. The two we're talking about removing would be your second and third MTSS people. Chairman Haig brought up the fact that your contingency fund is $40,000, roughly the cost of those two positions. So when I look at the overall budget, I look at the tax cap, I also look at it from the lens that some of that revenue is also disappearing from the co-op budget. So although we're talking about Brookline tonight, there's going to be a potentially larger share of tax effort for the co-op budget because of the loss of revenue. So my recommendation, first of all, is around safety. For $40-something thousand, I don't personally believe it's worth bringing people out and risking this. Because I have the contingency budget, I will have staff turnover. It happens every year. So I believe that I will, at a minimum, probably be able to fund at least one of those MTS positions. Having one already coming back into the budget gives me one for each building. Gina has and will continue to do an exceptional job of identifying our concerns academically. And knowing the concerns provides me the biggest single benefit of having time. We're talking 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and 6th graders. That means I have multiple years to address those deficiencies. We'll know them when they go to the co-op. I also have an unbelievable teaching staff that will address quite a few of them between now and the end of the year, because that was an interim assessment. Please also understand that was an interim assessment with masks on, in a whole new environment, 6 feet away from any of my peers, in an environment that was totally new for kids. So I don't know how valid the data is, but it is data and we can use it. So I can fully support the board approving the tax cap budget, knowing that, number one, we will try to find the $48,000 in the operating budget. If we can't find the $48,000 in the operating budget, I would come to the board and request the funding through the contingency. Also, if Article 9 should pass, the board would have up to the ability to retain up to 2% of the unreserved fund balance. The board would also, via a public hearing, have the ability to then allocate some of those financial resources to fund the positions. As much as I appreciate the support, as much as I understand people would show up, and I think I could pull something off relatively safely, I don't think it's the right time, because we don't need to have an event that becomes the spreader event and now puts us all in remote, because that's only going to set our kids back. I think over the time, Gina, Bob, Kelly, and I have proven that we will find the money, do the right thing, and if we can't find the money, we'll still look for solutions. Just because we don't have MTSS doesn't mean we can't offer a smaller stipend to an individual, do a variety of things to address these competencies. So I don't want the board to be put in this position where you feel obligated to do this in-person piece, when I believe the budget with the tax cap provides us the ability to move forward, and we will find a solution to the MTSS Paris.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate that input, and as a personal note, I was 100% behind it. Everything you said is exactly where my head was too. So I would fully endorse that, everything stated there.
I'd like to add a little bit here today. My negative reaction to what Andy was just saying was the use of the contingency fund for a position, for a for personnel thing. That's, in my mind, not really what the contingency fund is supposed to be about, unless that happens to be, sorry, lighting here went out on me. Unless that happens to be related to special education. Special education, all bets are off for that. But other than that, I'm really not comfortable with using contingency funds to fund positions. And I also have some serious concerns about the final warrant article, the 2%, which we can discuss when we get to that one. I have concerns about the whole concept of that, but especially using those funds to fund a position.
Yeah, I mean, to me personally, the contingency is our bucket for a shortfall where there's a significant school need. We have the special ed trust, we have the facilities maintenance trust. Contingency is just that to me. It's where there's a shortfall that we have a public hearing, so it's fully transparent, and we use those funds as needed. And if we have a significant need, even if it's staffing because of remote learning for the last year, to me that's fair game. That's my opinion.
But I understand Brian's point is that that falls into the operating budget then in your automatic.
No, well, those are not fully loaded. They don't carry pension. They don't carry anything. They're not a fully loaded full rate person, and that's the difference here. So I'm not advocating for a staff person. Yeah, this is a different position.
Yeah, but a contingency though is supposed to be for something that's unexpected that comes up. Boilers need to be replaced, or some sort of a building need, something real, an emergency thing that comes up unexpectedly in the middle of the year. If you're spending that money at the beginning of the year paying somebody's salary, then you don't really have a contingency for something unexpected. I want to emphasize though that what Andy started off with was he was also confident they could find some additional funding within the operating budget. Contingency is a plan B, but I'm saying I really don't like that plan B. I'm good with the plan A, but I really don't think the contingency fund should be used in that manner.
And I can definitely respect that, Brian, and you are correct. I do have a plan A for the operating budget. And again, my priority would be to simply get a second one. So call half of 50,000, about 25,000. And then I would have one for each building because one is returning. So my greater point is I don't think we should be bringing people out over $49,000.
Very good. let's put it to a vote. Okay, so we'll start with the Finance Committee if you want to go first.
Sure. This is Brian. I am voting yes in favor of the operating budget. Matt, if you want to go next.
Yes.
And Dennis.
Yes.
Very good, thank you. So that carried 3-0 on the Finance Committee. Becky, we'll start with you, please.
Yes.
Karen,
Karen, yes.
Allison,
Allison, yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
and Ken, yes. So that carries 5-0 with the school board. Okay, so we're going to move to Article 2 now. All right, so to see if the Brookline School District, we're going to need a motion for this after I read it, please. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with a warrant. I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong article. We're on Article 3, I apologize. All right, so Article 3, to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate a sum of up to $75,000 to be added to the previously established schools facilities maintenance expendable trust fund. This sum to come from the June 30th unassigned fund balance available for transfer on July 1st, 2021. No amount to be raised from taxation. So a motion, please, as presented. Thank you.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so that motion's on the floor for input.
I have a question about the order of articles. So I understand the funding. We don't have to have the SAU budget up higher?
The SAU budget is not funded through an unreserved fund balance.
So it doesn't matter?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, thank you.
So on this one, there was a comment around usage earlier from Mr. Power. The one feedback I guess I would provide to that is I understand where he's coming from for this year's usage. We do have a capital improvement plan that looks well beyond this year. It's a 5-year plan, and out in the future years, there are some fairly significant expenditures that we've tried to delay a little bit too with the environment we're in. So I would support this because of the long-term ramifications and how we're trying to level fund that for the future.
And I would just like to say that I have always supported a maintenance fund in the capital, in progression of the capital improvements plan and so on. However, I do have a concern this year that because we got all that special one-time money last year and the tax rates went down, tax rates are going to go back up to, about where they were relatively last time. But that could be a big impact on people. I'm a little bit concerned about that. I am planning to not support this maintenance fund this year, and also the special education to kind of soften that a little bit. But that would be the only reason why. I agree with wholeheartedly with the concept of the maintenance fund, and I've supported it in past years.
Very good.
I understand where Brian's coming from. However, knowing that the situation we have with the roof at RMMS, the boilers at RMMS, and any other like windows, doors, things that I know are on capital improvement plans that we need to get done. It sucks. I get it. But to not put stuff away, to not add and put money away when we need to, doesn't make sense either. And I think we've taken cuts this year and not done. We're cutting a position. We're making sacrifices. So it's not as if we're trying to be completely insensitive to it. And and putting in the maintenance fund and in the special ed fund is to protect the interest of our taxpayers going forward, even if it seems kind of harsh at the moment. That's my opinion.
Yep, and I agree with everything that you just said as well. It's a tough situation. It's a tough thing to try to find what the proper balance of everything is.
Okay, any other questions or feedback? Okay, let's put it to a vote. We'll start with the Finance Committee.
Brian, I'm going to vote no. Matt?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Very good, thank you. That's 2-1 for the Finance Committee. We'll go to the School Board. Becky?
Yes.
Karen?
Karen, yes.
Allison?
Allison, yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
And Ken, yes. So that carries 5-0 with the School Board. Thank you. All right, so we are now to Article 4. So the motion is to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate a sum of $25,000 to be added to the previously established Special Education Trust Fund. This sum to come from the June 30th unassigned fund balance available for transfer on July 1st, 2021. No amount to be raised from taxation.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. So that's on the floor now for comments or questions.
I just, it's kind of a question. You know, for the expenditure in the presentation for this year, the anticipated, you know, in the slide it said anticipated expenditure this year is 0. But the commentary that went with that is student services is express, you know, is telling us that there are a lot of needs. And so I know that I don't know what causes us to say anticipated 0, but there might be some significant cost. It's kind of a mixed message. So it leaves me a little bit confused about what we may be looking at. I know for a fact that there's no data, we don't have any information about it, understandably, but I know for a fact that that student need as a result of COVID is significant this year. And I don't really have a good sense of what that can be translating to, because I suspect that there's probably a lag in what that's going to amount to. Are there a lot of students right now, more students than typical, that are being evaluated for services? You know, I just don't have a good sense of this, because I feel like this is one of those areas that we could find ourselves a little bit stuck. So I guess I would just like a better sense of what that, you know, there's that $0 sign, what the likelihood of that changing this year is, and what we might be looking at next year.
I can answer that first, Aaron, to your question about, you know, identifying students. Are we seeing an increase in the number of students being identified for special education? And the answer is yes. However, part of that is when we were in remote learning, it was very difficult to evaluate students for special education. And what we saw when we returned to the in-person environment is the number of special education referrals, because of the spring and concerns of remote learning, went up. So really a part of that was due to the backlog. So there were a number of unanticipated expenses that you know, are currently in the Brookline budget. We did have to add a position to CSDA this year for special education because of student need. We also, you know, when those situations come up, I work with the business office and Amy Rowe to be able to locate funds within special education. Oftentimes that's through IDEA and other grant opportunities as well. You know, there's always a possibility of having to go to the trust. You know, out of district placements for students are very expensive. And even when we have to bring in specialized programs into the district, have significant costs. You know, that could be a student that moves in tomorrow. We also have students that exit as well. So there's a lot of variability with it, with the budget.
Okay, thanks.
So I've been pondering, Brian, your feedback earlier and Andy's about the contingency, and I fully appreciate and respect it sounds like we can find the money, and I respect your point on kind of more catastrophic versus funding. I think that's a valid point. I'm wondering if we should move, this is just my opinion, I wonder if we should move contingency up, and personally I'm wondering if we put that in place of special ed this year based on the feedback we're fairly funded here on the 200,000, and if we moved up the contingent to be funded first, that could potentially be a gap fill for an unexpected thing. I'm just throwing that out there as part of our conversation.
I wouldn't be opposed to that, considering who knows what 2021 is gonna bring.
Right.
Legitimately.
I think it's a good suggestion, Ken.
I would still like to see the 25 go towards special ed if we can, and to fully fund it, because those expenditures, a single kid can blow through 225 without even blinking. Like the cost of one kid in special ed is enormous. So I know it sounds, and I can't, it's hard to imagine that that's how much they can go through in a year, but it is. It's realistic, and it's not out of the realm of possibilities. But I agree that maybe putting that 40K first might be a better option for us.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm advocating for. The tax impact for this is 2 cents on the thousand. You know, it's a fairly insignificant impact to keep it fairly level funded. I just thinking about the where we're at. To me, that would be a little more flexible, and then we could use it here if needed too.
My suggestion would be to take your positions on the special ed article, move forward with the other articles, and then if that point you want to renumber articles, the board can take that position because it's the school board's warrant.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, any other feedback on this? Put it to a vote then. Start with the Finance Committee, please.
I vote no on this. Matt?
No.
And Dennis?
Yes.
Okay, that goes 1-2. We'll move to the school board and start with you, Becky.
Yes.
Karen?
Karen, yes.
Allison?
Allison, yes.
Aaron?
Erin, yes.
And Ken, yes. So that's 5-0 on the school board. Okay, let's move to Article 5, and this is the contingency. So the motion is to see if the school board, to see if the school district will vote to establish a contingency fund for the current year for unanticipated expenses that may arise, and further to raise and appropriate a sum of up to $40,000 to go into said fund. This sum to come from the unassigned fund balance available for transfer on July 1st, 2021. So we need a motion as presented, please.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, that's on the floor for discussion.
To build on my earlier comments regarding the injection of federal funding through the most recently passed stimulus bill, I did pull the numbers. So in the CARES Act, there was $30 billion allocated for this program. In the most recently passed omnibus, Congress appropriated $82 billion. So almost a 3-time increase. Based on the estimate, I believe Brookline received roughly $20,000 from the CARES Act originally. That would project us to receive somewhere in the neighborhood of $54,000 through this federal funding. There are some restrictions with it, of course, but it is a very broadly defined category. And as I stated earlier, I would encourage the board to look to those funds which are slated to arrive, as opposed to appropriating this $40,000 contingency for this year.
Matt, when are those slated to arrive, out of curiosity? Is that, because this is FY22, so this could be, we could be talking about next, well into beyond the timing of that too, potentially.
So those funds will remain available until, I believe, September 30th, 2024. I'd have to verify that. But essentially those would be rolled out, I believe within 30 days of the law taking effect, those funds would need to be distributed to the states, and the states would take action from there, I assume in short order.
And is that specific for COVID related reasons? Is that earmarked for COVID specific?
It's COVID related, but the categories are very broadly defined to include anything from technology for remote learning to staff costs. I mean, it's the same language that we saw with the CARES Act. So there is an immense amount of flexibility for school districts with this funding.
Thanks. Any other feedback? Okay, let's put it to a vote. We'll start with the Finance Committee, please.
I vote yes. Matt
No.
and Dennis.
Yes.
Thank you. So that's 2-1. The Finance Committee, School Board now. Becky, please.
Becky, yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Allison,
Allison, yes.
Aaron,
Erin, yes.
and Ken votes yes as well. So that's 5-0. We'll move to Article 6 now. Here's the motion. Shall the voters of the Brookline School District adopt a school administrative unit budget of $1,953,257 for the forthcoming fiscal year, in which $361,236 is assigned to the school budget of this school district. This year's adjusted budget of $1,918,864 with $354,875 assigned to the school budget of this school district will be adopted if the article does not receive a majority vote of all school district voters voting in this school administrative unit.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. So that's on the floor for discussion. I think from the board standpoint, we've talked about this already. So if there's any Finance Committee input, otherwise we can move to a vote. All right, why don't we go to Brian, if you want to kick it off?
Dennis,
Yes.
Matt,
No.
and I'll vote yes.
Okay, so that carries 2-1. So let's move to the school board. Becky,
Becky, yes.
Karen,
Karen, yes.
Allison,
Allison, yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Ken votes yes. That's 5-0 on the school board. Okay, so we're at Article 7 now. The motion is: shall the school district adopt the provision? Shall the school district accept the provisions of RSA 198:20B, providing that any school district at any annual meeting may adopt an article authorizing indefinitely, until specific rescission of such authority, the school board to apply for, accept, and expend, without further action by the school district, unanticipated money from a state, federal, or other governmental unit or private source which becomes available during the fiscal year.
Moved.
Second.
Motion's on the floor for any discussion.
I so have questions. This is like a nightmare for me to hear. My brain cannot process this. So my first question is, does this come up every year, or is this like once and done?
Article 8 has traditionally come up every year.
Okay.
This Article 7 is new language suggested by legal that will eliminate Article 8 and portray a much clearer picture of the ability of the board to accept funds from sources that become available. This is kind of mainly in response because the CARES Act was new funds this year, and if you recall, we had to do a separate vote to accept those funds. This new wording would allow us to accept those funds in the future without having to go back to the board for a specific vote.
And it doesn't have to be renewed every year.
This is probably the new warrant that's going to become every year, wouldn't it?
That's my question. A new every year warrant?
No, I don't think so, because it says indefinitely in there.
That's my question. And
Authorizing
to take an earlier point in our discussion, this will eliminate that article that every year comes up about special ed aid and that. So this is basically giving us the ability for the board indefinitely in the future to accept funds that become eligible for school districts.
Thank you.
So we could have added indefinitely to Article 8 all these years and not have had to vote on it every year?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Just
Don't be sorry. It was good.
All right, let's do a vote. Finance Committee, please.
The Finance Committee is not taking a position on this because it's not a financial thing,
Thank you.
unless the other members of the Finance Committee disagree with that.
Just so you're aware, Brian, we had to consult legal on this matter with one of our other districts, and you can take positions on non-monetary articles if you choose so. You do not have to.
Yep. Unless somebody feels like we need to, then I would recommend that we not. All right. Then we won't take a position on it.
Okay, thanks. We'll move over to the school board. Becky,
Becky, yes.
Karen,
Karen, yes.
Allison,
Allison, yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Ken, yes, that's 5-0. Okay, I believe we still need to talk or vote on 8, just because of the voting, right? Is that an accurate statement?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So the motion is if Article 7 passes, this article is unnecessary. To see if the school district voters will authorize the Brookline School District to access future year state and federal special education aid funds in the event that special education costs exceed budget limitations.
So moved.
So moved. Oh, second.
Thank you. Motion's on the floor. Any comments? Put it to a vote. All right. I'm going to just have our school board vote again. Is that good, Brian?
I think the Finance Committee has usually taken a vote on this one.
You want to vote on this one? Okay, very good. Go ahead.
I'll do Matt.
Yes.
And Dennis.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes.
Okay, that's 3-0 with the Finance Committee. All right. School board, Becky.
Yes.
Thank you. Karen?
Karen, yes.
Allison?
Allison, yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Ken, yes. That carries 5-0. Okay, we're at Article 9. Motion is to see if the school district will vote to authorize indefinitely until rescinded to retain any unused portion of the year-end unassigned general funds from the preceding fiscal year and subsequent fiscal years, provided that the amount of year-end unassigned general funds does not exceed in any fiscal year 2% of the current fiscal year's net assessment are under RSA 198:5.
So moved.
Need a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so that's on the floor. Any comments, questions here?
So how is it rescinded? If the people wanted to rescind this, how do they go about rescinding it?
It would be placed on as an article, either via the board or a citizen's petition, and voted on at, go through the deliberative session and then be voted on at the annual voting day.
Is it like a simple majority or is it one of the super majorities? I'm just curious so that we have all the information.
I do not believe this requires a supermajority.
Okay.
So to clarify a question that was asked during the public session, this money that's sitting out there effectively acts like a contingency fund. What are the rules for being able to spend from that?
To spend from this fund, the school board would need to hold a public hearing. The reasons would need to be stated, and the board would take the input from that public hearing and then make that decision. Those rules recently changed, Brian. It used to be you had to ask the DOE and you had to ask, well, if we were in the co-op, you would be asking the finance, the budget committee because of their nature of their RSA. So it is intended to be used in emergencies, but at the same time, you know, those are the requirements: a public hearing and a vote.
Yeah, it seems like this was the form of this was originally very much like a contingency fund, where it requires some special situations. but now that it kind of just requires a public hearing and a vote of just the school board, it doesn't to me feel quite like a contingency fund anymore. I'm concerned about it being used for taking things off the budget and not returning the funds to, you know, the unassigned funds, basically to lower the tax rate. That gives me some heartburn there for that.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with Brian on this one, just hearing it a little bit. I think we have the other buckets are a little more transparent. I personally, I don't think I'm in favor of this either.
Let me just throw out the fact, though, that if you don't do this, you could be in a lot of trouble if you have some catastrophic expenditure that needs to be made. You know, as the public hearing could stop the willy-nilly spending that you guys are afraid of. I would just say that in Hollis, we've used it when that exact thing happened. I think it was 1 year we used it for an elevator that died and another year for a boiler. That was the only way they could have repaired those two items, was to use that. Now granted, it was more restrictive in how you got approval, but the school board is the stop to make that happen. And with, you know, you usually only have about a $40,000 or $50,000 contingency that you can get through the annual meeting, whereas Hollis Co-op have had, you know, $95,000, $100,000 as their contingency. So not doing this will, you know, put you in a little bit of a risk. In fact, if we hadn't received all of that CARES money, Hollis and Co-op probably would have survived with their contingency and their retained fund balance, where you guys would have $40,000 to pay for hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of COVID-related expense.
Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, dating back to the days when I was on the co-op board, I believe the high school elevator failed the day before opening, and we had to use this balance to fix that near overnight in order to open the school.
Yes, that is correct. They couldn't have opened the schools without having that balance available. And honestly, it's because of Hollis and Co-op having that retained fund balance that we've put forward for you guys.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Was it, you know, wondering how long of Hollis? So it's been around for a while. I'm wondering what precipitated this year, including this.
Well, for me, it was realizing that we may or may not get money from COVID or FEMA. There was one point where we didn't think we were going to get anything, you know, and I'm looking at Gina and Andy and Bob and going, oh my God, we are in so much trouble.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we all looked at each other and said, retained fund balance.
That helps, thanks.
You know, from my perspective, I felt obligated to put this out there, because if you don't have this type of fund, then you would have potentially had to go into the negative, because you would have still needed your COVID supplies. And then you would have a special meeting to approve a deficit appropriations, which is never fun.
Any other feedback or questions?
End up with this sort of fund, would we move away from the contingency fund then?
You could do that. I mean, right now, Co-op and Hollis do have a retained fund balance and the contingency fund, but that made more sense when the retained fund balance was more restrictive. Now that it's not, you could, after this is, you know, in place, you could drop the contingency fund.
Yeah. I'm kind of conflicted on this one, because it's like we've been fine forever without having one. We haven't needed one. At the same time, always in the back of my head has been the worry of large unexpected special education expenses. as much as we have a $200,000 thing for that, that can still, we can still blow through that quickly. And you know, if that were to happen, what would we do? I don't know. This would give us another avenue of option, but I am concerned about it, you know, being used more than just, you know, for emergency purposes in the future. So I'm kind of conflicted over it.
Brian, all I can share is that I've been here. This is going to be the end of my 8th year. We have not touched it in Hollis. We have not touched it in the co-op. We have yet to use, I believe, a contingency fund even since I've been here. I wouldn't take this lightly, but I do think when I look at this as a long-term safeguard for taxpayers, I think it is good to what I would call like a rainy day fund.
Yeah, that makes me feel a lot better about it. I appreciate that.
And I'm not one for magical thinking, but we haven't needed it because we voted in favor of it every year. I'm just saying.
Any other questions or comments? All right, let's do the Finance Committee vote.
So first we need to decide, do we want to make a recommendation on this? What's the feeling of Dennis and Matt on that?
I see in the document that the Finance Committee isn't listed. I don't know if that was determined by legal counsel or the basis was for that.
No, it was an oversight.
Yeah, you're in the document I'm looking at.
Yes. And I guess this could have a significant financial impact, so I recommend that we do take a position on it, if that sounds good.
I would agree with that. It is a significant thing.
All right.
Agreed.
Okay, then we'll take a position on it. Dennis?
Dennis votes yes.
Matt?
No.
You know what? I'm going to abstain on this one. I'm too conflicted.
Okay, so that's 1-1 with an abstention. 1-1-1. We'll move over to the school board. Becky.
Becky, yes.
Karen.
Yes.
Allison.
Yes.
Aaron.
Yes.
And I'm going to vote no, just from a transparency perspective, but it still carries 4-1. All right, our last one is Article 10. So to transact any other business which legally come before said meeting.
You don't need to take any action on that one.
I do want to say that as a side note here, I'm planning to adjourn the Finance Committee after the discussion of the Budget Committee warrant article.
Okay.
Okay, well, if we don't have to take a position on that, we can adjourn then on the Finance Committee, Brian, at 9:23.
No, he needs to cover the Budget Committee
Yes.
article that's on the agenda, Ken.
Thank you. Yeah, and actually, before we move to that, did we want to discuss about moving the contingency or anything around at all? Does anyone want to discuss that?
Can I make a motion to move Article, goodness, what is that? Article
5
to 4?
Yeah. So you're making a motion, Allison, just to clarify, to move the contingency article ahead of the special ed article, so they'll just reverse numbers.
Yes, sir. That's my motion.
I'll second that. Any feedback at all with that?
I feel I mean I guess special ed isn't considered to be is more restrictive because we're bound by you know a lot of laws about what would have to come out of that. But at the same time, I think the special ed fund is broad and there's a lot of potential need for that. I just it doesn't settle well with me putting it. I mean, I can respect why we need the contingency, and obviously I support it. I just feel like you know, this is a time where special ed, if any, in the coming year may get triggered, and I'm just not totally comfortable with it, but I'm a little bit, you know, I'm a little torn about it.
Okay, thank you. Other input? All right, so I think this is just a school board vote, so we'll start with you, Becky.
So do I vote no to leave it as it is?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
All right.
So are you voting no, Becky?
I'm voting no.
Thank you. Okay, Karen.
I vote no.
Allison.
I'm voting yes.
Aaron.
No.
Okay, and Ken votes yes, but that does not carry 2-3. Thank you. Okay, so we are going to move to the question around moving from a finance committee to a budget committee. So I'm going to raise a motion and then we'll discuss. So the motion is to see what action the board will take regarding the board's position on moving from a finance committee to a budget committee. So I need a motion as I read that, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Okay, so that's on the floor for conversation now.
I am not in favor of supporting a budget committee.
And Karen, could you just quickly state, I mean, you represented us on that, so I think that's helpful to.
I mean, I know Matt can speak to it as well, but we spent a good portion of our summer really diving into this to see if peer towns and peer schools had significantly different outcomes based on their structure of a budget committee or finance committee. Part of that research was also interviewing members of finance and budget committees. And there were some great things that budget committees brought to their towns as far as really taking an advocacy role and an education piece that I think is above and beyond, say, maybe what we're doing right now. I don't think that the select board can change the charter of the finance committee to add those pieces in to make it more robust and give it a little bit more of that, you know, education piece to it. But the data didn't really bear out that a budget committee was going to slow the tax impact to a town or a school district. And I think at the meeting we had, Brian brought up a good point of Kelly having 2 masters in Hollis and 2 masters at the co-op, and then this would just be another set of masters at Brookline. I think the administration has done a great job, and historically the school board, to keep the tax rate slow. And I don't think having potentially people involved with agendas could really swing that and really hamstring the school district. I'm not in favor at all.
Thank you, Karen.
I also have concerns about the way the budget committee is suggested to be selected. To be perfectly honest, out of the group of people that show up for the meeting, and as opposed to being running and elected for a term out of the first year, that is particularly bothersome to me. The fact that there's, you know, like we're entrusting people who have never run a school district to guide the knowledge, to suddenly have a knowledge base and an understanding of what it takes to actually to finance and budget for a school district and determine what's in what the costs should bear out. I just have major concerns about it. I don't see how the data that was presented to us showed that there was any benefit to it and that there was any real savings or that it would make more sense for us to change the way we do things.
Yeah, I just guess I would say I also share that concern. I fear it's cumbersome. There's concerns where we heard earlier about the SAU administration and the amount of this would require more administrative work to do just this. And honestly, I'm looking at all the data, and it feels like a ringing endorsement that our process is working relative to our peer schools and districts. So I'm also not in favor, and that's my feedback there. Any other input here? Should we put it to a vote? Okay, let's put it to a vote. Becky?
I vote no.
Karen?
No.
Allison?
No.
Aaron?
No.
And Ken, no. So that carries, or that 0-5, not in favor. Okay.
Sorry. I just wanted to interrupt here and say the Finance Committee will be discussing this separately tonight. And so if there's nothing else, then we can adjourn the Finance Committee meeting if Dennis and Matt are both in agreement with that.
So moved.
Second? Second. All right, then we'll have to take a vote. Dennis?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
And I vote yes, and so the Finance Committee is adjourned. Thank you very much for everybody. It was a great meeting, a great hearing, great discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
all.
Night.
Okay, so we have a little bit of work left around policies. This first motion, I'm sorry, I just want to note Finance Committee departed at 9:31. All right, so we're going to move to policy discussion. So this next motion is to see what action the board will take regarding policy DAF federal grants. So we need a motion to accept the third reading and adopt policy DAF federal grants, please.
So moved. Second.
Very good. Motion's on the floor. Any feedback on this? This is our third reading here.
It's being presented as it was in the last couple months, so there have been no changes.
Thanks. All right, let's put it to a vote. Becky?
Becky, yes.
Karen?
Karen, yes.
Allison?
Allison, aye.
Aaron?
Yes.
Ken, yes, that carries 5-0. Thank you. All right, the other policy is policy EFD wellness. This is its third reading as well. So we need a motion to accept the third reading and adopt policy EFD wellness, please.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's on the floor. Any input?
I just
Okay,
want
let's
to
put it
comment once again, this is the exact same policy.
Thank you, Gina. Let's put it to a vote. Becky?
Becky, aye.
Karen?
Karen, yes.
Allison?
Allison, aye.
Aaron?
Yes.
Yes. And Ken, yes. That carries 5-0. Thank you. Okay. So thank you. We got through all that. We are now at the non-public, and I know.
Wait, we still have, we added
Thank you.
a deliberative item.
Yep.
And the motion would be to see what action the board will take regarding appointing Alana Justice as a school district clerk.
So moved.
Second. That motion's on the floor. Any input?
I just want you to know, I think we have a great candidate. She's very active in our school system. She has come forward, and I believe her expectation is potentially actually to run for the position, so we won't have to do an appointment every year.
Great.
Great.
Thank you. All right, let's put it to a vote. Becky?
Yes.
Karen?
Karen, yes.
Allison?
Allison, aye.
Aaron?
Yes.
And Ken, yes, 5-0. Thank you, Alana, for stepping up.
Thank you.
And then I just wanted to confirm with the board that we would be moving forward with a virtual deliberative session. I just want to make sure that that's what the board wants, because to do that, we need to notify all voters by January 22nd, which the SAU would start working on immediately if that is the case.
Do we need to vote on that?
I think it would be best to have a vote so that there was a formal recognition of that.
Very good. Let's. I support that based, Andy, your feedback earlier I think was on point, and I worry about the health and safety, so I would support that.
I agree.
Motion?
Yeah.
I have a sample language for a motion, if that's helpful, from legal counsel. To elect to approve the alternative annual meeting format pursuant to HB 1129, Chapter Law 8, Session Year 2020, for the 2021 school district annual deliberative session and voting.
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry, my computer died, almost died there. Okay. Been a long one. Becky,
Aye.
Karen,
Karen, aye.
Allison,
Allison, aye.
Aaron,
Aaron, I.
and Ken, I. So that passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay. We do need a non-public this evening. So we'll need a motion. What? Sorry.
I'm sorry, Andy, did we want to bring up the additional warrant articles?
Oh, thank you, Gina. We did have 2 petition warrant articles sent to us. We will do the required public hearings on those. First, one of the 2 was to list the tax rate on the ballot for each of the warrant articles. The second was to form a study committee to look at if the Brookline School District should expand to grades 7 and 8, thus eliminating sending Brookline students to the co-op for middle school. I don't have the exact wording in front of me, but that's the gist of the citizens' petitions.
When would the public hearing take place?
Well, we received the petition, so I'll be looking at the calendar and we'll notice those, and they'll be also via Zoom. They're usually relatively quick because a petition warrant article goes on the ballot no matter what.
Okay. So thanks. So that's for awareness and no action at this time then, right?
Correct.
Thank you. Okay. So this is a little new to me with the Zoom setting and the non-public. Are we going to do a non-public and then jump into a new Zoom after this, or?
Once you go into non-public, what I can do is remove everyone from the meeting, lock the meeting down, stop the recording.
Okay.
Transfer host to you, Ken.
Okay.
And then you run the non-public, then you close it, then you'll do the public portion, but the public portion, I believe, is just to adjourn, so someone can manually take those notes, those minutes, and send those over to our office.
Thank you. Okay. So we'll need a motion then, board by roll call, go into a non-public session pursuant to RSA 91A:3, Roman numeral 2, the dismissal, promotion, or compensation of any public employee, and RSA 91A:3, Roman numeral 2C, to discuss a matter which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of a person other than a member of the body or agency itself.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so we'll do a roll call vote. Becky?
Becky, aye.
Karen?
Karen, aye.
Thank you. Allison?
Allison, aye.
Karen?
Aye.
And Ken, aye. So we're moving to non-public at 9:39. And to the administration, thanks. I know it was a long night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.